Hello, everyone, and welcome to another small screen Star Wars. As always, I am Julian Mush. I'm joined by Rachel Wilkinson,
Hello.
and we're going to be talking about two Star Wars shows today, as we will be for the next several weeks. Star Wars
Yes.
The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 12, and Star Wars The Mandalorian, Season 3, Episode 2. So, strap in. It should be another. It should be a good one. Last week we did the premiere for Season 3 of Mando, and we paired that with Episode 11 of The Bad Batch, and that was a nice pairing, and those were both decent enough episodes. But these are much better in both accounts, in my opinion. So, there's going to be lots to talk about here. There's much more lore stuff, meaty lore stuff to sink our teeth into.
Mm-hmm.
Sink our teeth into as if we were a giant mythosaur. Or one of those weird green-eyed lizard bat things.
Dragon?
Oh, yeah. It's kind of like a mini dragon or one of those snow vultures. So there's a...
We didn't even get to see what those look like.
Teeth. Yeah, they probably don't have teeth. So, well,
like
maybe.
Probably a beak, not teeth.
Well, we don't know that. Some
true.
birds also have teeth. So, and birds used to be dinosaurs, and dinosaurs had teeth. So, what do you know?
I can't think of a single bird that has teeth.
Don't some... maybe I'm thinking of dolphins for some reason.
That's not the same thing.
Are those not descended from birds? Anyway,
what the fuck? I think you're thinking of literal dinosaurs, like pterodactyls.
I probably am thinking of dinosaurs. I bet you see that trailer for that Adam Driver movie, 65 Million.
No, I didn't.
No, so this is a movie. It's kind of like that Will Smith movie from where he was with him and his son did a movie together called like After Earth, I think it was called. And
okay.
I'm pretty sure that. And correct me if I'm wrong. Spoilers for that movie, maybe, because I don't know if this is right, but I'm pretty sure in that movie the twist for that was that turns out it was actually not like post-apocalyptic Earth, but actually Earth from the past, and it's dinosaurs that they're having to deal with. Now,
okay.
I'm pretty sure that's the exact same plot as this Adam Driver movie. And I saw a commercial where they like kind of somehow found a way to like insert an NBA player into the movie for for like the purpose of the trailer, and it was really lame. I just want to be clear, I did not think it was a good idea. But I hope this does not start a trend where they start inserting random people into movies that aren't actually in the movie.
Yeah,
just to sell it.
Weird.
Yeah,
okay, and you know what? We should know this because we're Canadian. Geese have teeth.
See? Okay. I knew there was... I knew that. That's what I was thinking of, not dolphins.
And flamingos, and like maybe... Yeah, it looks like geese and flamingos for sure have little teeth.
Maybe...
And now that I think about penguins, maybe. But
I was going to say penguins, and I think it was penguins and not dolphins that I wanted
That
to
makes
say.
sense, yeah. But geese for sure have teeth. I'm like, oh yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah, those are scary animals.
They're small teeth. They're like more like little barbs. But okay. So.
Yeah, that's somehow worse, I feel like, when it's paired with a beak. But anyway. The point is, there's lots to talk about this week. So, like last week, I think we're going to follow the same format, which is start with The Mandalorian, then go into The Bad Batch.
Sure.
And we'll do a brief break in between, and that will give the people who are watching live a chance to go to the bathroom. And us.
And us, yeah.
And us.
Get more water, whatever we need.
Exactly. And for those who are listening on the podcast, I'll cut it up nice and neatly for them. And of course, that is the prime audience, so we try to do it as audio first as possible. That being said, if you want to see what we look like, or at least what I look like and what a picture of Rachel looks like for now, you can watch us live. We do this every Thursday. Last week was late, but typically every Thursday at around 7:30, 8 o'clock Central. So you can find this on YouTube and on Twitch, and you can subscribe to those places, and you'll get notified when we go live. It's at Tower Babblecast, basically, on both of those. So you can find that there. And if you want to help support the show and you have a little extra cashola, you can go over to patreon.com/Tower Babblecast, where for as little as $5 or now $2.50 for a limited time. Actually, no, the $2.50 perk is there for categories is staying put. That will be there for a while. But for a limited time, you will get access to the $5 perks at the $250 level for the next month and a half. So just be aware of that. Patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. At $5 level, we do a monthly film club. We're late last month.
Very late.
Yeah, sorry about that. last month's movie, which is supposed to be Jackie Brown, is still coming. We're gonna get on that. We're gonna soon is the promise.
We're waiting on
Um,
Jeremy to get back from vacation.
That's right. Uh, and then after that, we have a movie that we're going to select from the Discord. There's been a few suggestions in there. We're going to find a way to make that fair. I'm not sure how we're going to do that yet. Probably just a random number generator. And we will make a selection from the Discord. And if you want to join the Discord, but you don't really care about the movie clubs, you can do so for $250 a month. That's all you got to do. It's so reasonable. Less than like well, coffees are like $10 now. It used to be like, oh, for less than the price of a coffee, but like coffees are so expensive now, so that's not really a good analogy. For less than a gumball, probably. What's inflation on gumballs? They used to be $1. Now they've got.
I don't know. They're probably like a toonie now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And
sorry, that's a Canadian $2 coin. For those who don't know,
I think it makes a lot of sense
about our stupid money and its dumb names.
Loonies and toonies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and. Only the loony has a loon on it, and then the toonie has a polar bear on it. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into these episodes. Follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast. Need to get that in there as well. Okay, let's get into these episodes. We're going to start with The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 12, titled The Mines of Mandalore. And we've heard a lot about the Mines of Mandalore up until now.
We have.
And now we finally got to see them, and I'm going to be honest, not as impressive as I thought they'd be. But, you know, what am I? Who am I to judge?
I mean,
I don't know what our mines supposed to be. The only mines that I could think of that are like that I could as a direct comparison are obviously the mines of Moria from the Lord of the Rings.
Okay,
and those are very impressive, and they actually got even more impressive when you watch the Amazon show. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Don't they like dwarves live in those and like?
Yes,
that's a little different. Like Mandalorians don't live in the mines, so they're not going to look nice. They're just mines.
They're literally just a mine hole in the rock.
Right? Okay. Yeah, so like I don't know. To me, I was just like I don't know what you're expecting a mine to look like other than
they put up a plaque next to the living waters, so you know it means that it's a tourist attraction at the very least. You know.
Yeah, I think it's kind of more of like a spot that they go for like a Mandalorian-esque like baptism as opposed to like a tourist attraction. But
fair enough. Like a Mandalorian. What's the word I'm looking for here? What do you do? Like a journey, like a biblical journey, a crusade? No, that's not a crusade. There's another word for it. It'll come to me. I'm sure.
I don't know. A mission?
No, that's similar. Also close. Pilgrimage. That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, pilgrimage. Okay, so the recap this week included references to the concept of redemption, needing to bathe in the waters. Obviously, they really hammered that home last week. So if you didn't pick up on that, they reminded you again in the reminder this week. And they also reminded us about the callbacks to the mythosaurs. They've been referenced a couple times, but in this case, they just used the armorer's reference to it. But we also got a season 1 reference to the mythosaur as well. So they just hey, remember mythosaurs exist. And then we get the backstory on Bo-Katan again. Cautionary tale, tried to rule with only her blood and the sword. It didn't work. And then, of course, that Mandalore is poisoned. Those are all the key takeaways that Disney and Lucasfilm wanted you to remember before going into this episode. Obviously, last week, actually, and I guess before we get into the nitty-gritty here, last week, a couple things. We talked about how they kind of started trying to define the timeline a little bit for how this all fits together, and we were quite confused about how this works. I've done some more research, and I guess the best shorthand for this is that the story of The Mandalorian takes place in like quote-unquote real time, right? So this third season is coming up to like about 3 years since the first episode of the show started.
Oh, okay, yeah,
and about that same amount of time is supposedly have taken place over in the Star Wars universe.
Okay.
Which I guess is an easy shorthand, but it doesn't always. I don't think that always works either necessarily, because like obviously, we pick up. I would be surprised if we didn't pick up next week's episode immediately following this one, and I'm pretty sure there's been other episodes where we've done the same. So it's not like a week separates each episode.
No,
of Mandalorian, so that doesn't really work either. But
I know what they mean in like years, because it's like the amount of years between the first ever episode and now
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. But so I kind of get that, but
So I like the idea in concept. Like, hey, this show is going to take place over years, so it's going to take place over years of the characters' lives also.
right, yeah.
And that should give it more weight and allow us to kind of tell these kind of like more expansive stories. But in practice, it doesn't. I don't feel like the show leans into that concept, and it because of that, when Jon Favreau says, "Oh yeah, it's been years," it's like, well, really, it doesn't feel like it's been years.
Right, yeah.
But then they need reasons to justify things like, "Oh, Navarro has, had this housing boom." Right? Or
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
And so they need to kind of have their cake and eat it too. And I don't love that. But there's I guess there's worse things, but that's just my take. I just feel like the show hasn't capitalized on that concept, and maybe they just only decided that recently. But
Yeah, because I feel like obviously some of that Book of Boba Fett stuff obviously happens like in between, so you can't just have like
right.
this season of The Mandalorian
Well, I guess
start like where the last season ended, because then you're like, okay, well then where does the Book of Boba Fett stuff fit into? And like, what did that only take like a month for Boba Fett to do all that when it's like it would have taken longer? You know what I mean? So
right.
I kind of understand it a little bit, but yeah, I get what you're saying though.
And they're
It's
saying like, okay, well, there was a year and a half between the time that Mando left Grogu with Luke before Book of Boba Fett aired, and that's
right,
about as long as he was with Luke. So he trained with Luke for like 2 years ish.
right, yeah.
But like, I don't know about that either. Something doesn't quite add up, and I think if the show is going to use that kind of this time methodology, they should lean into that more and kind of really help us
Convey
feel
it a
the
little
sense
more.
of time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. It'd be easier if like Grogu aged normally, but he doesn't. So
right? Exactly, he'd already be like a teenager. By
you're
now,
like, oh, he's a
basically.
toddler now. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the other thing, so like, I feel like at some point in the timeline, we're gonna see Grogu speak or hear Grogu speak for the first time, and it's gonna be very weird. But what I want to know is like how, because even Pelimato makes a reference in this. Oh, is that his first word? I think he said Peli, which is funny.
Yeah.
But this idea that like, okay, well, if he has a first word, does that mean that it takes him 20 years to learn to speak, or whereas like a child can learn to, once they start using their first words, it's not years before they can speak sentences, right? So when Grogu finally says his first word, will he then just be able to speak in? I guess I have a hard time understanding like how developed his brain is at this point, right?
Right, because it's like he's been alive for so long. So yeah, like I get it. It's kind of a confusing concept when like something has been a baby for so long,
Mm-hmm.
but he can still like understand things and like navigate things. But yeah, I get. Yeah, I guess we'll just see. Like I feel like they're probably gonna do it similar to how like kids speak in our world, where it's like they start off with a few words and then like
Sure,
gradually you just add a little bit more.
But how
context,
gradually?
But yeah,
Are we gonna get like a new word every season? At some, and then like after like 20 years, we'll be Grogu can finally say a sentence.
Yeah, no, I think it would be a little quicker. It'd be more on like a normal
I would hope
timeline.
So.
Yeah,
it's just very confusing. I do want to see a teenage Grogu though. Like what is an adolescent Grogu like? That'd be funny.
Like when we get teenage Groot in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, do you think they'll do the same thing? He's like, he's moody and like or whatever.
Maybe.
Wonder. Yeah. All right. Anywho, so this is again season 3, episode 12, chapter 18. And I was listening to another podcast, and they had to like apologize to it. Like, listen, we're gonna talk about this as seasons and episodes. I know that they want us to think about this in chapters, but it's too confusing. So we're not gonna do that. And I have to agree.
That's fair.
We're gonna also not do that. I think for the first 2 seasons we kept tripping over that, where it was like, in Star Wars Episode 2, I meant Episode 2, the prequel movie, but then not the chapter that we're talking. You know what I'm saying? That kept happening. So I just want to avoid that. When we talk about the movies, those are also be episodes, but I think it'll be much more clear if we just
can just say
2,
the names of the movies as well, though. Like
that's true. Just to be clear, just to be very clear.
If we're also needing to make those differentiating comments,
we should mention that there was some news about the movie side. It's just nonstop bad news about movies in the Star Wars.
Oh
space. Yeah. So the the Rogue Squadron movie officially shelved for now. Shocker there. I don't think that one was. Patty Jenkins was already in movie jail, and I guess we're not surprised necessarily.
Right.
But disappointing because that was supposed to be the next movie up on the slate, and they have a slot in for what is it, December 2024 or 2025 for a
Okay.
film
Yeah.
that they need to fill. I mean, they don't technically have to, but they have it like reserved already for a Star Wars movie.
Right.
The next one up that's potentially in development is the Taika Waititi movie. The word is that he will also star in that film, or at least appear in that movie. But we don't really know anything else than that, and he's not currently working on it actively, as far as we know. So,
Right.
not great news from the movie front. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't it's not like I was like overly excited for the Rogue Squadrons movie. Like I was like, okay, yeah, like I was for sure obviously gonna go see it, but it's not like something that I'm like super bummed about. I would have been probably more bummed if I heard that the Taika Waititi one
Mm.
was shelved because like I just very much enjoy
Well,
the content that he makes. I saw some rumblings, you know how you
oh
always
yeah,
see on the
people get
internet
yeah,
of
yeah.
people being like, "Oh, like get rid of his instead." I'm like, "You're morons." Like
he's
he's great. Like I don't
he's
know.
he's popular, therefore there's haters. That's just how it
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
I just think he would do a very good job with a Star Wars movie, like, but I don't know.
I think so too because I think the tones align well,
Yes, I think
and
so. So,
I think or at least they can. We've
yeah,
never had
yeah,
a pure comedy Star Wars movie, but there's a lot of comedy. Like even last week's Mandalorian, where like that's using your head is a pretty
yeah.
funny line in my opinion, right?
But yeah, just
Um,
kind of that goofiness, and I don't know. Like
yeah,
he did such a good job with Ragnarok. I feel like it was it. Right? Was it Rag? Yeah,
yeah,
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, and then the one which is the most recent one.
Okay, yeah. So I know people are like, Love and Thunder wasn't like as good
It wasn't as good. They're right
as
about that.
Ragnarok, but to me, I was like, Ragnarok was so good that like I'm not worried about Taika Waititi doing a Star Wars movie. I think the tone would really work for his style.
Well, I also
He's
think,
just so funny. Like I just think
yeah,
it'll work.
if you watch any of Our Flag Means Death, which R.I.P.
Hmm.
that show because it's a shame that it only got one season and then canceled in the kind of the he got Zasloved in the HBO
Okay, yeah.
stuff.
Well, I like the What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
And
so
it's
funny.
so funny.
Yeah.
And so these are like obviously pure comedies, but they're and especially Our Flag Means Death is able to tackle I think more complex ideas, at least emotional concepts. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's kind of the point being is at least that movie is still on track, but be prepared for disappointment because the next announcement we get about that movie could very well be that it's been canceled. So
Yeah.
I just don't know why they can't figure out like all we had were Star Wars movies forever, right? And then
Mhm.
they've messed up the last one so badly that now they can't seem to figure out how to make any Star Wars
Well, maybe they're
movie.
just scared. Like I don't know. They're like second guessing themselves and their writers and directors. I don't know.
But they're making the shows are clearly doing fine. So
That's true. Yeah.
there's stuff that they can lean on in terms of learning things, but the things that work and things that don't work for the Star Wars world, right? And for some reason, they haven't applied that logic at all to the movie space, and it's managed by the same people. These aren't different groups, you know, but they every time they try to stand something up, and even when they do stand things up, there's like all sorts of turmoil.
Mhm.
Episode 9 had Colin Trevorrow as the director, right, at one point, and then he was canned, and then they brought back JJ, and then my opinion, totally ruined that movie, and then really essentially, by the way, episode 7 also had its own issues. The only one movie that really didn't have a lot of like drama was episode 8, surprisingly, at least on the production side, until after the movie came out, and that's when the
Right.
drama happened.
Yeah.
But it's just wild to me because even and then Solo, same thing. There was Lord and Miller were supposed to be the director of that movie, and then they got canned halfway through. Rogue One, same thing.
I think
It's
we can
like,
learn here is to maybe not fucking can your directors halfway through projects.
well, I don't know why they feel like they need to.
Like,
And it like
yeah,
in
it's
Rogue One,
just
it worked out. I think
yeah.
because they brought in the guy who did Andor
Mhm.
to finish it, and that's impressive. But I don't think it totally worked for Solo. That movie I like, but is not well regarded in my opinion. And like they were clearly, I think, Lord and Miller aiming for a more comedic tone, and they got cold feet, and they're like, no, we don't want to do that. So, now and then they're like, oh, we'll make a Top Gun space movie, and it's like, well, what could possibly that should be a sure bet in my opinion,
Right.
right? We just saw how popular Top Gun was. If you can do that movie in space, people will like it. But they're like, Patty Jenkins, she made Wonder Woman 3, and that movie sucks, so we're not gonna. It's like, I don't understand. This is frustrating to DC. This happened at DC for a long time,
right?
And this type of like creative turmoil just does not. When movies do come out, they're usually bad, or they don't come out at all, and they get canceled. And that's what's happening. We're just getting cancellations all left and right.
Yeah,
it's very frustrating. I want to see. I haven't seen Star Wars in the movie theater since Episode 9, and that movie sucks, as I said 3 times already. So I would like to see a good movie, Star Wars movie, in theaters again, please.
Same.
Okay. All right. So let's get into this. Tatooine. We start on Tatooine. We get an establishing shot of Mos Eisley, right? That's where we're, or is it Mos Espa?
It's Mos Eisley.
It's Mos Eisley, right?
Yeah.
So we're outside, or like basically getting a shot of Pelly's shop, her garage. But we also see that there's fireworks. There's some sort of like street race going on. It looks like.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is it turns out it's Bunta Eve, which, if you remember Episode 1 of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, to be clear, that was the occasion for the pod race that Anakin takes place in. Bunta Eve. My girlfriend was like, "How do you remember this stuff?" I'm like, "How do you not remember the word Bunta Eve? It's such a fun thing to say."
Yeah.
And the point is that there is a lot of useless information in my brain, especially about Star Wars.
Well, yeah, it kind of comes to the territory.
It's going to good use, at least I would say.
Yeah.
And so it's Bunta Eve, and then they later call it Bunta Week, which feels like a lot of it like stretching out your birthday into being a full week instead of just a day.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why there's this celebration. We catch up with Peli Motto. We haven't seen her since the Book of Boba Fett. She's now missing a tooth. We don't know why. Maybe we might find out maybe in the same way that we found out about 3PO's red arm from Episode 7 in a comic book or something. And she's engaged in the process of ripping off a Rodian, basically. She's pulling the same move that, if you remember in Obi-Wan Kenobi, Obi-Wan complains about how, if you're going to steal my parts and sell them back to me, can you at least clean them first? Which I think is so funny. They're basically she's working with the Jawas to steal parts off of rich people's speeders, who are there to celebrate Bunta Eve or Bunta Week, and then charging them to repair it, quote unquote, with the same parts that they stole. So it's a classic racket.
I love it.
I don't like it.
I think it's so funny. I think it's very Mos Eisley. It's very and with the Jawas, they're so funny. Like that she just pays them to go steal parts off of like rich people's fancy ships, just to be like, oh yeah, I don't know, it's gonna take a while.
Yeah, and then she does the whole garage salesman guy, like, oh yeah, your thrust capacitor is broken.
Yeah.
We're gonna have that's gonna be weeks to order that.
I can put it on a rush, like.
Yeah,
so good.
exactly.
But I'm like, I don't mind, because it looks like she's doing it to like somebody who's rich and fancy. It'd be different if she was doing it to somebody like, I don't know, struggling.
Yeah, totally.
But
Hold on. My dog is freaking out. I'm gonna let him into the room so he can stop freaking out, I think, for a second. 1 second. Come on, inside. Come on. Good boy. All right, he's fine now.
Give him his Eeyore.
His Eeyore's right here. It's just something about a dog and an Eeyore that's quite funny to me.
It's
they have quite
cute.
similar personalities, Winston and Eeyore. Anyway, where were we?
We're talking about Pele's racket and how I think it's funny.
I mean, it is funny and it's played for laughs, but it's just so scummy. I just hate it. Anyway, So Mando arrives, and she I think it's funny that she shoos off the Jawas, and they're like, "Wait, go get the Jawas back before they go to the cantina."
Before they get wasted.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like how they're wearing it looks like they have their party stuff on, the Jawas too. Like they have little colorful I don't know if it's beads or whatever, but
Yeah, it's Boonta Eve. Come
yeah,
on.
it's funny. I was like, oh my god, it's like Mardi Gras or something. It's so funny. I'm
I
like, look
want
at
to
the
know.
Jawas just ready to get wasted.
I want to know when on the human calendar Boonta Eve is, so I
Ooh,
can
yeah.
have a Boonta Eve party.
It's a good idea.
Right? So Mando arrives in his N1, and they talk about how it's purring like a loth cat or something, and then he's like, yeah, it's running really well, still faster than I know what to do with, which is I think an odd line. There's a couple weird lines in this movie in this episode that I don't really understand, because he says that, but despite the fact that he used the speed booster to escape the pirate literally last week, so
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. So Grogu does a little force jump into Pelly's arms, and that's a cute little moment. And then we made that. She makes that comment about the whole, "Oh, look, it's his first word" thing, which is also good. But she basically asks, what's he doing here? Amanda, what are you doing here? And then there goes this little thing: are the Hutts back? Are you taking out Boba Fett? Which I think is a funny combination of questions, right? Because I do think the Hutts will be back. We'll probably have to deal with that at some point.
Oh, probably.
And those twins from the Book of Boba Fett. And then, why would he be there to take out Boba Fett? They were literally working together in the last time they spoke. I don't know.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, it's yeah. You never know.
Or do you think that Boba Fett's running such a tight ship that she's having a hard time getting away with her little racket thing that she's running?
I don't know. I think she's maybe just teasing him more so than anything.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, what, you gonna come back and fight Boba Fett now?
Well, cause I guess every time he arrives, she just assumes he's there to blow something up or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Anyway, he says he's there to look for an IG-11 part. And she's like, "Okay, Grandpa."
Yeah,
it's really good. And so she asked for the Jawas back, and they say that they can't find anything, that they won't be able to help her. And that instead, she's going to try to sell him the R5 unit that she has hanging around. And of course, we know, because they've talked about this all the way back in season 1, that this is the same R5 unit that Uncle Owen originally bought.
This is so old.
It's so old, and I think the idea was that the droid, never left Tatooine.
Right,
I think it's why he gets scared when he gets into the ship today. It's so cute when he's like, "Oh," he's like, "Yeah, you're an astromech. Act like one."
Yeah.
Know?
He's just a little guy. He doesn't work good.
Yeah, he's an old man. So I just think this whole thing is just very delightful. So he's like, "No, it's no good. I need my droid now." And he's like, "Well, what about this one?" He's like, "No, I need a droid that's rated for spelunking." I think the idea of saying that out loud is weird, because how many things do you know that are rated for spelunking in the real world?
I have no idea.
Exactly.
I barely know what spelunking is. Other than when people put on those wetsuits and rappel down waterfalls. I know that as spelunking.
Is that spelunking? I think spelunking is exploring caves. That's my understanding.
Okay, yeah. I guess there's also that, exploring caves. But
I rappelled down a waterfall once, but it wasn't in a cave, so I don't think it's considered spelunking.
Okay, so maybe I was doing it in caves or something, and that's why it was called spelunking. I don't know, but yeah.
I don't know either. But the point is that it's such a very specific type of thing. I'm not saying that they wouldn't make spelunking droids in Star Wars. I just think it's funny that
I guess it makes
IG
sense.
units are technically rated for spelunking, which is funny.
You'd need droids that are rated to go into mines and to I don't know, for people who what's the word?
Well, wouldn't you find a mining droid or something that
yeah, that's true.
For this purpose?
But
I don't know.
I don't know. He just needs to be waterproof. Maybe that's the issue.
He likes IG-11 though, so he wants to work with his friend.
Yeah.
So R5 gets all scared hearing about the mission that he needs to go on, and but Pelly's like, no, this R5 built for adventure.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Yeah. So we have Volta Fox, I think, in the chat here on Twitch, saying that Grogu's rated for spelunking, and yeah, surprisingly, see, that's the thing. it's hard to even know what can or can't be rated for spelunking when a little baby can do it. So.
Right? Yeah.
I almost thought we would get, like, you know how R2 has those little, like, booster jets that he
Yeah.
uses all the time in the prequels, not at all in the sequels. And I was kind of hoping that we'd get to see R5 like sporting the rocket boosters and like flying around the ruins and stuff, but no, he gets to stay with the ship, so it's not quite as fun.
Yeah. No, yeah, he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't have. He must have them though. I would assume.
Is R
How else
so
is he gonna go
R5 is a
spelunking?
higher number than R2, but it's not clear to me if it's a newer style droid than R2 is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I just feel like for spelunking, you would need him to be able to like fly and go down.
Yeah,
He's
you'd
like, what's he
think
gonna
you'd-
do? Just crash down there? Like, he doesn't have arms.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. So there's a line here from Pelly that says that R5 is good as the day it came back from serving the rebellion, which I think is a reference to the story from a certain point of view, which is a series of short stories. There's one for A New Hope, and there's one for Empire, and they basically are short stories for every character that doesn't have a speaking line in
Right.
those movies. And there's a lot of fun ones. There's a lot of not so fun ones, but there is one about R5, and it has R5 talking to R2 at that moment that he's being purchased by Uncle Owen, and R2 basically convincing him to pop his motivator so that, because he's got this big mission he needs to go on.
Yes, yeah.
And so R5 sacrifices himself so that R2 can go on that mission. So
Yeah.
it is pretty cool, but I guess that is technically working for the rebellion, but it's I don't think that's I think she's stretching the truth in the sense that I don't think she knows
yeah, I
anything
think
about
she
that.
absolutely is.
But she's just trying to sell the droid, but it is a nice kind of nod to that story, which is nice. So she offers to restore his droid port on the N1, which is funny because it's like we got that little bubble
Yeah,
for
right.
like one episode, and then let R5 co-pilot. So that's the other thing. It's like, well, and R5 can do some co-piloting, which is actually a nice little side effect
Yeah,
of having an astromech droid, obviously.
absolutely.
Which we've seen several times. I feel like we've seen R2 fly an X-wing more than Luke at this point.
Oh, for sure we have. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's like, "Don't worry, I'll give it to you for half price," and give her a free oil bath. And when we see R5 again, he does look pretty good, like cleaned up and stuff, like looking very
Yeah, had a nice bath. Yeah.
looking very sharp. And anyway, he's scared to leave. That's what she says. Careful with this one. His circuitry's a bit fragile. She's like, "Wait, I thought you said this is rating for adventure." Like, what? Can't hear you. Bye.
Yeah, you already bought him.
Yeah, and then they take off and head off on their adventure, and we get this really cool shot that we originally saw in the trailer, which is the fireworks that are going off for Boonta Eve are like reflecting in the cockpit window of the N1, and it is pretty cool. And he kind of leans over and says to Grogu, "Are you ready for an adventure?" And then they leave, which I kind of feel like would have been fit better in the first episode of the season.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
you know,
I felt like the fireworks could have been cooler looking instead of just regular fireworks.
I guess you, yeah.
I'm like,
you
it's
feel
Star Wars. Come on, guys.
you can't come up with something more exciting than just
Yeah.
regular ass fireworks.
It's like how in Lord of the Rings when Gandalf makes like super cool ones.
yeah, one that's like a dragon. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was like, why aren't there cooler cooler fireworks in Star Wars? This is something that like the internet would complain about as like a
as a nitpicking issue, like
as
this
a
episode
nitpicking issue,
sucks.
being
Yeah.
like, oh
Well,
yeah,
actually,
they used a wrench in this episode and the fireworks look like ours.
right. Well, there's other things like there's at one point they say like burn in hell or whatever, and it's like, well, that's weird. But there was some complaints. So IGN gave this episode a 5 out of 10.
Okay.
And the major complaint on the kind of the blurb, I didn't read the whole review because I didn't want to color my take on it, but the major complaint of this episode was that the lighting was bad and that it was hard to see what was going on. Did you feel like that was the case for you?
Not really, no. Maybe they just have shitty TVs.
That was like the first thing that people said in the comments. It's
Was
like,
that they have a shitty TV?
they're like, oh, well, they must have a shitty TV, which is funny. But And, and like, so one of the the other thing, people who are more serious about it were like, well, it's possible that a lot of the more modern television shows are being designed for more modern televisions, and
Right, yeah.
TVs like my OLED that I have are better at handling high contrast things like
Yeah.
with really dark darks and bright brights, or even
Right.
extremely low light scenarios. Like we get a lot of low light stuff in this episode, but
It's true, yeah.
um, they compared it to like the Game of Thrones stuff
It
that
was
was like
nowhere
low
near
light.
as bad as that.
I agree.
Yeah, nowhere near as bad as that. Like, I don't know, man, turn your lights off in your house. Like, it's I don't know. To me, it was not that bad. Like, because I do actually remember being like a little bit dark, but like it was not dark enough for me to have to feel like I needed to get up and like turn off my like kitchen lights kind of
Oh,
thing.
I always turn off all my lights before I
I'm
watch
sure, yeah,
anything
I'm
like
sure you
that.
do. I should more often than I do, but I'll do it if I feel like I need to, but I didn't feel like I needed to.
Well, the
So
other thing
there's
is that
that.
like my TV has like a high gloss. For whatever reason, these OLEDs all have these high gloss monitors.
Oh,
So any
okay.
light really reflects very easily off it, which makes them hard to use in the daylight sometimes if
Gotcha.
you have something reflecting.
My TV's
But
very old.
mine is not.
Yeah,
But
I don't know what it is.
so I
So,
mean, for me, I thought the episode looked great, especially in HDR. So
yeah.
and I kind of thought, I know exactly what scenes they're talking about, and there are these scenes later on in Mandalore where there's kind of this greenish tinge. It's a little bit darker, but to me, it kind of just made it feel like a more unique
Yeah.
location in space, and felt more alien, quote unquote, not just like another location on Earth that we're just calling space.
Yeah, I would definitely
So
say it was not like a hindrance
yeah,
of
okay, good.
darkness. So, yeah.
I
And I
I
have my
figured,
TV's like 10 years old. So,
yeah, I thought so. I thought you would be a good test for that. So that
yeah.
okay, good to know. All right, so speaking of which, we get to Mandalore and we're in orbit, and Mando is telling Grogu that it's not as scary as it looks because we see the planet is covered in like storms, and he says that every Mandalorian can trace their roots back to Mandalore, which is interesting. I mean, we saw that Book of Boba Fett when Boba Fett. Actually, no, that was in Mandalorian season 2. Anyway, it's confusing. When he pulls up his chain code and he's like, "Well, I'm
Right.
right here on this chain code," and so I guess the idea is that the foundlings get added to these family trees the same way as like a adopted son would get added
Right.
to the
Yeah.
family tree. So they can trace their lineages back to the original Mandalorians. Now, what's not clear to me is if the Mandalorians originally settled Mandalore or if that's their actual homeworld, because it seems like there's like native species to Mandalore that seem more like
Right.
aligned with the planet itself that aren't just humans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
it
don't
feels to me
know.
like it's a settlement situation, but they've been there so long that it's become
Probably.
their
Yeah.
homeworld.
Like once you've been there that long for like thousands of years, it's kind
Right.
of, yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. It's different when you think about it that way because in our own world, we don't really go and settle other planets.
Not yet.
Yeah,
Not yet.
so not yet. So yeah, that is an interesting concept that would happen, but yeah, I would assume that at least for an excessively long time they've been there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so he also says that he grew up on the moon of Concordia. So we see Concordia for the first time. This is, of course, a place we have visited in the Clone Wars. And then, not to be confused with Concord Dawn, which is
No.
another. I literally always get those things confused, but it's only because their names are very similar. And he also mentions that Kalevala, which is where we went to last week, is in the same system. So he shows
Yeah,
us
it's
example
close.
on the
Which
map.
is interesting that like Bo-Katan set her shit up so close.
Well, it's also like, why didn't they just move there? It seems like a pretty nice place.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's like okay.
So anywho, the line here that's nice is a Mandalorian needs to understand the maps. It needs to understand maps and know their way around. That way, you'll never be lost. And it's a nice sentiment. Understanding your place in the world will allow you to kind of feel like you belong in the universe, which is nice. I really like the way that he kind of like gives these lessons. It's very sweet how he kind of talks about being a Mandalorian and what it means to be a Mandalorian. And I even found that like, I guess these people just can't help it when they're around Grogu, but like even Bo-Katan was like, opening up her heart a little bit and giving him like telling stories and all these things about being a Mandalorian and stuff. It's just really interesting the way that like people interact with him.
Well, yeah, you're not gonna be mean to a baby.
Well, you don't have to be mean to it, but you can also ignore them. They don't
Yeah,
have to, you don't have to give them attention. So they enter into the planet's atmosphere through this storm. R5 again is freaking out. I think I referred to him as R4 at one point, but in a previous episode, so please respect my ignorance. So into the storm, they come out into this like wide view, of the planet's surface, and you can kind of see these massive shards of green crystal, and it's actually quite nice. It's really beautifully realized.
Yeah, it looks very cool.
Looks not at all like how we've seen it portrayed in any of the animated form, but of course the planet's been glassed now, so it's a whole thing. And by the way, glassing as a concept is this idea I think we talked about last week, but of like turning the soil into crystal from the heat.
Yes. Yeah.
This is like a common sci-fi trope that we see.
It's like lava, but different.
Well, it turns to lava and then
crystallizes.
Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's very cool looking. It looks like, I don't know, like kyber crystals and like I don't know,
it does.
just like things that you would see like in a cave full of shiny things. I don't know.
Well, and it looks alien, which again is cool.
Yeah.
So the fusion bombs they mentioned before have disrupted the magnetic field of the planet, interfering with their systems and cutting them off from their comms, so they can't call out for help, which is very convenient from a script writing standpoint, but kind of cool when you think about it. Like, oh yeah, like they blew it up so badly that like literally nothing works here anymore.
Yeah, it is. It's neat to think of like a planet being like so completely cut off in that way. Like there's like no communication kind of in or out.
Well, and it really would allow you to act as like a very cool like home base.
Yeah,
be very safe from interference, right? Well, at least not this type of interference, but like from outside interference. I mean,
yeah.
So they land, and we get to see the crystallized surface up close. He sends out R5, and I love how he's like, "You ready to go?" And he's like, "Rah, rah, rah." And he's like, "No, it wasn't a question." Although he did ask him if he was ready to go, which is technically a question. So
technically, yes, but.
He tells him to go check the atmosphere of the ruins below the surface. Grogu gets worried as R5 disappears behind this corner. And he's like, "Don't worry, we can track him on this scope." And then they have this little like tracking device. Where's my astromech app? And it disappears off of the scope.
Oh my god.
And I also love how it is like he has to like be like, "Don't be a baby" to the droid. It's just like a really fun way to interact with them, in my opinion. Yeah. So he has to go out to get R5. And he's like, normally this is droid work, which sounds like how people would refer to women's work, which is really like quite odd. But anyway, he pressurizes his helmet, which I think is a thing we knew he could do already because he was there was that whole sequence where I think it was they were on that space station in Book of Boba Fett.
Yes, that really cool circle one.
Yeah, and I think the idea was that part of the space station was still pressurized in some way,
right?
Like they could still breathe, but he does fall off that when he's like practicing with the Darksaber. He falls off that gantry.
Yes,
and I assume that part isn't pressurized, so I guess that means that he can survive in space for a short amount of time because he can pressurize the helmet. And again, I'm not clear how that works because when you put it down over your head, is there like a suction thing that like suctions to your neck or something?
Yeah, maybe underneath? It's just kind of got like like some sort of material that does that, I would assume.
Yeah, I don't know. It's best not to think about it. I don't think they want you to think about that. Anyway, I think as he gets out of the ship here, I just think he looks really cool. It's just one of those moments where it's just like, it's just really cool to look at Mando with his shiny armor walking around.
Yeah.
It's just really cool looking. So just need to call that out every once in a while. And he looked really cool last week when he was like getting rained on in Kalevala. And it looks cool here. And that kind of like greenish hue really adds a cool look to it, I think. So Mando finds the ruins underneath this like crack and is ambushed by some creatures. We find out what they're called later on. And he's on this ledge that's over by the ruins. So we get this like really kind of quick action sequence. And this one is like, I think, one of the better ones in this episode. They're all pretty cool, but this one I thought was really cool. So he's on this ledge. He has to fight off these like 3 basically like cavemen. It's the like short form. And so he uses the Darksaber to defend himself. He is clearly still having trouble. It's heavy still for him. So he like waves it around. He knocks one off the ledge. He stabs one in the leg with a knife and then stabs the last one through the chest. Now, what's surprising about that to me, and then that one dies also and falls off the ledge.
Yeah.
But what's surprising about that to me is that we don't often see, I mean, not really since the prequels, do we see lightsabers cutting off or stabbing through people very often, right? It happens, but it's usually like not highlighted, and like I think one of the things is dismemberments have been like become less of a thing that Disney wants to do.
Right,
My understanding is that, like, they even were very shy about that whole thing in the last Star Wars Jedi game, because they're like, well, we don't want to let people just like cut people up into pieces. So you weren't able to like dismember everything, especially living creatures.
Yeah.
You could like take off horns and stuff and that kind of thing. But in this case, it's like stabbed right through the chest. There's actually 2 stabbings in this episode. So he does feel a little bit more mature than I was expecting there, where I thought they might have cut away or done something different where we didn't see it.
Right, where you don't actually like see it happening. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I guess I think there's a good mix of it. Like, you got to kind of add a little bit of that every once in a while, I think.
It's a sword. It stabs.
Yeah, right? Like, you can't have someone wielding something called the Darksaber and not show them cutting or stabbing
anything.
or exactly.
And obviously there's got a million examples of where lightsabers have been used to dismember things and cut things and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying, it just feels like lately, and not this is like a pure Disney thing, but along with the Disney acquisition came with it, felt like and the animated shows really leaned away from basically anytime a lightsaber is cutting anything, it's a droid, right? So
yes, yeah,
and that's fine, but it's interesting to see them use the Darksaber in this way. I think it's a good thing. So he defeats these creatures. Again, I can't remember what they're called, but we'll get to that when Bo-Katan reveals what that is. Rescues R5, and they return to the ship. R5 takes an atmospheric analysis. Turns out it is breathable. He's like, oh, Bo-Katan is right. Mandalore is not cursed. Which I guess his interpretation of cursed would be poisoned.
Right, yeah.
And actually, it is kind of surprising that it isn't, poisoned, because there's no trees anymore or anything, doesn't seem like.
Yeah, but I guess if there's no dirt, like if everything's crystallized, like how would anything grow?
That's what I mean, but like how does you have breathable air then?
Right, true. I guess maybe there's trees somewhere.
Maybe something somewhere. I mean, and it's unclear. Maybe it's like it's breathable but not healthy or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
So Mando and Grogu in his pram. So he's still got the pram, which we saw last week. I think it makes sense. It reminds me of, do you remember that scene in episode, I think is it 1 or 2, Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace, where Yoda has his like little floating meditation seat.
Yes, yeah.
They're walking down that hallway, and he's like, I think they're talking to Obi-Wan and Mace Windu.
Yeah.
And
it's like a little disc or whatever that he
it's this little like padded chair that floats.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense for a creature with super short legs to like have the ability to like A, speak with people at eye level, and B, keep up with them without having to use the Force to like leap around all the time,
exactly.
Right?
They just have tiny little baby legs. Like they can't they just be constantly like running along beside you.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it just makes sense that he has this. It's like it actually, maybe they need to like equip it with some weaponry or something so he can defend himself more.
That'd
or something.
Be amazing.
But yeah. And it should be made out of Beskar, in my opinion, but maybe we'll get to that too. So he says, "Look, that's the Civic Center," which I thought the use of Civic Center last week was funny too. It just feels very modern.
It does, yeah.
It's like, oh, go down by the community center. It's just down over there, around the corner. Don't pass the stop sign.
Yeah, it's by the bus station.
Exactly. So he has to go to the Civic, and then I think the way that Pedro Pascal says it, he like puts the emphasis on a different pause, so he calls it the Civic Center.
Right,
like the
yeah.
center of the city, which makes sense when you. I feel like that actually makes more sense, but the way that
I guess that's true. Hey,
Bo-Katan
it's
says it much more casually, which is
yeah.
interesting. So they drop down to the streets and then further down into the sewers beneath the city. As they make their way in, we see some green-eyed lizards. You called them dragons, which is
Yeah.
funny.
I like everything has green eyes too.
Yeah, it is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Mando
I don't know, it looked
believes.
like a little crocodile with wings. I'm like, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
dragon.
it looks like one of the creatures from Donkey Kong Country.
Actually, yeah.
Those
Oh
little
man, what are
snappy
those called?
things.
Chompers or whatever the
Yeah,
hell they're called? Something like that, yeah.
yeah, that's what it looks like. It's funny. You should jump on its head, and that'll make it,
Yeah.
go away. So where was I? Mando believes that following the dripping water should lead them to the mines. So they continue their spelunking adventure. They turn on their helmet flashlight. So I have that Mando helmet. It actually comes with one of those flashlights,
Oh,
but I
that's
don't
pretty
know how to
cool.
put it on and or use it. So I've never used it. In some rubble, we find a Mandalorian helmet, and we hear the Mandalorian theme play softly in the background as he picks it up. And it appears to be like rusted or like corroded in some way. Why do you think that would be? I think is the idea that Beskar,
Um
does it rust, or is it just that this one is
I
specifically
yeah, I
messed
don't
up?
know if it would. I just kind of thought that that had something to do with like the
The bombings.
like the bombing in it as a whole. Yeah, like yeah, obviously Beskar is super strong and but it can still like be melted. Like we see it get melted down. So I would
Yeah,
assume
that's
that
true.
like some extreme heat from like giant bombs and like that kind of stuff would still fuck with their armor. But
It's also possible that it's been exposed to that same device that what's her name made, Sabine
oh,
created.
Sabine,
Remember she made that machine?
maybe yeah, but they kind of got rid of that in
Yeah,
Rebels.
what a funny thing to hold, like to create a whole like subplot about this
Yeah.
weapon that she created that's so powerful that can kill anyone wearing
Yeah, it's
uh
super heat. It
Mandalorian
targets
armor.
Mandalorian Beskar, yeah, and super heats it, and it basically
And
like
fries
fries.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, they make a point of like destroying it and the plans and everything, and
No, I know, but
but
this could be
but yeah,
remains
I
from
mean
before that happened, right? And
that's
it
true.
seems clear
That's
that the
true.
Empire used that weapon at some point. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. Anyway, it's old is I think probably the takeaway. But it's all doesn't matter because it turns out it's a trap.
Yeah.
It's a trap because it's a giant crab machine
Right?
cyborg creature
That
that's
came out of nowhere.
it literally came out of nowhere that like jumps up and grabs Mando from underneath the rubble.
Yeah. It's
Luckily
like
Grogu wasn't standing right next to him, so he
right?
gets to like
Yeah.
watch as this happens.
It's like one of those I immediately thought of those trapdoor spiders. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
because they
totally,
do that
totally.
when like prey walks over their little web and then they come flying out of their little like hidey hole and like snatch
Yes,
them.
I
I
hate
was like,
I hate
ew.
spiders so much.
Right?
Yeah.
They're so gross and they're so sneaky.
So maybe this is supposed to be more of a spider than a
I kind
crab.
of got more like spider vibes from it, yeah. But like you know, mix like a spider crab. I don't know.
Yeah, it just gives me the
It
heebie-jeebies.
it's weird eye like because obviously that like thing is in it.
Yep.
But yeah, I was like, ooh, that's gross, and I think it looked pretty cool. Like I was like, oh, that's
Oh,
really
it
good.
looked
Like
really
yeah,
good. I
it
like
wasn't like dumb looking. It actually looked like pretty neat.
it's like gnarly. Like it's just
Yeah.
so wild. And like I hate to just keep ragging on Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, but man, this show just looks so much better than those shows, and Andor did too. So I don't know what it is about those two previous Star Wars television shows. Maybe they just did not have the time or budget to do the CG its justice, but man, I would not mind if they went back and like touched up some of that work that they did because
Right. Yeah.
this just looks so good. It looks totally real and very scary and like I said, just like really kind of like
Creepy.
creepy. Yeah.
Yeah. They did a really good job of like making like a some kind of monster, creepy, weird thing to be
Hmm.
hiding down on Mandalore. It's kind of like the vibes you get when you first see Darth Maul again in is it
Yes, I
Rebels?
also thought that. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
yeah.
when he
Hmm.
has like the crazy psycho like spider legs and he's all
His
like
horns are all long and gross. Yeah.
yeah, and he's all like a lunatic, but yeah.
turns out they need to trim their horns.
Yeah, I guess that's not that's in Clone
That's in
Wars,
Clone
not
Wars.
Rebels.
Yes.
Yeah, but I always like a creepy spider, mechanical spider thing that's
Yeah.
hanging around.
Volta Fox called it Crab Mech Spider Exo driven by a crab.
Yeah. Driven
That's
by a
funny.
crab, yeah.
Driven by a crab. Where were we? Mando is taken to a very rusted old workshop type area where the cyborg parks his crab machine and leaves the larger body emerging from the top as this spindly spider-like creature with all sorts of hoses attached to its body. Super gross looking. This one is even creepier. Like, it feels like the most like pure alien thing we've seen in Star Wars in a long time.
Right?
And like almost horror-esque in its design.
It definitely had that like feel of like a weird monster, but also like, you know, when you would see like really old horror movies and stuff, and it's like a mad scientist and his experiment
Sure.
goes wrong, and like it turns him into a monster. You know, that whole like trope.
Mm-hmm. That old thing.
Yeah,
totally.
it gave me like that kind of thing too, of like a creepy scientist kind of thing.
Yeah,
too.
who's like experimenting on his own body.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, ew, what is that? The whole time we
Yeah.
were just trying to figure out what it was.
I don't think we'll ever know exactly. I mean, they'll probably
think
name
so.
it or give it some sort of like weird backstory, but like it's not. I don't think it's like a species or something that we've seen before.
Because it's
Maybe
like
it's
this.
maybe it's that like eyeball from the trash compactor with it's like sick of not having a body and like.
Well, wait, what's that character? It's from like old. Is it from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Kang.
Kang. Yeah,
the
yes, where he has the like head in his body or whatever.
Krang?
It's Krang, yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yes, it's a brain. It's a brain with arms and legs.
Yeah, like exactly. It's like,
So I actually also got that same vibe. So yeah. Anyway, Mando's like in this like cage like thing. He's put on this like little like spit. I guess.
I thought it was gonna like try and cook him like how the Ewoks
thought so too. Yeah.
did. Yeah. Like the Ewoks do to Han.
Yeah. So the creature kind of like pulls out Mando's weapons, throws them on the ground. He doesn't care about that. He's just about sucking its juices. Just wants to suck those juices out.
Gross.
And so Grogu waits for a moment. So he's been waiting quietly in the background, waiting for his moment. So the cyborg moves away, and for a moment he tries to rescue Mando by using the Force, like lift the thing off, but it's like locked in. So it makes this noise and it alerts the creature. So Mando tells Grogu to get out of there and go find Bo-Katan. We see Grogu make this cool Force leap into his pram and then just book it.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. And over that time has to deal with multiple dangers. He has to avoid first the cyborg creature, then the lizard thing.
Yeah, I loved how the little lizard was just like, like on the side,
Exactly.
like kept jumping out at him. Like, so funny.
And then one of those barbarian creature things comes, and he has to use the Force on that. And then we get this big, like, triumphant, like, dun da da da, as he, like, Force throws this barbarian thing away.
Yeah.
Which is actually very cool, and obviously is supposed to show that, hey, look, he has done these years of training with Luke, and so he has these powers.
And they don't exhaust him anymore.
Yeah, he doesn't instantly need to take a nap.
Yeah.
So that is cool. What did you make of this kind of escape sequence?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was like, I don't know, him scooting around in that little pram is so cute and so funny. It just reminds me of like sometimes, because you know how like his species, they look old, right? So it just reminds me of like a little old man on like a scooter sometimes, like just scooting around. But
Yeah.
I was just thinking it's so cute when you see him like zooming around in that thing. I'm like, oh, yeah,
I might be
love
taking Grogu's cuteness for granted. Like he is basically super cute in every single moment.
Yeah, everything he does, but even when he's doing badass like fighting things, he's still so cute when he does it. But
And
I know some
just,
people are like, I'm sick of Grogu. I'm like, get out of here. Like,
get out of town.
Yeah.
It's
adorable.
The thing about Grogu, which is funny, is it's like he's very emotive. They really have made a really great puppet to like show you all these emotions, because as he comes out of the cave and he gets like ambushed by that barbarian thing, um, he has this moment of like fear, and you can like see it on his eyes, and like this little like sound it makes, and then he's like he's like becomes determined, and then uses the force, and we get this kind of like musical cue thing, which is actually quite cool. But yeah, I don't know. I just think it's kind of impressive. I think this is like the first moment that we've seen him use the force to save Mando before. Before, obviously, the Mudhorn comes to mind.
Right.
But
yeah.
this is the first time where it's like he's like being much more proactive about it than reactive, in the sense of like he's also, because he's now has to go rescue Mando, but he has a little bit more of his own agency here, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I said last week when I was like, oh, like I'd be so pumped to like watch him fly the ship.
Yeah,
Because he
instead, in
has to
fact,
save Mando, but they have the astromech there to
they
do
have
the actual,
astromech
yeah.
to do the flying, and I love how he like points to the little like he's like, go here.
Yeah, it's so cute. He's
Yeah,
like, that
it's
one.
super
I'm like,
cute.
oh,
Yeah,
adorable. But you know, that kind of shows that like he has a very good understanding of things. Like Mando was like showing him the maps and like teaching him about being a
right.
Mandalorian, and it's about like how you navigate and knowing where you are in the world and that kind of thing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was
So
like,
he's
oh,
learning.
yeah, he's learning. I'm like, look at
Learning
him
to be a little
using
Mandalorian.
his dad's lesson.
So over on Kalevala, we see Bo-Katan is alerted to the ship approaching by her droid, and she's like, "Let's go get rid of him once and for all," because she's annoyed that he's back. And what do you make? This is another one of those lines where I'm like, "What do you mean by that? What do you mean to go get rid of him once and for all?" Because like her
Yeah.
next sentence is, "Didn't you know I wanted to be left alone?" It didn't really feel like the type of thing that you would do if you're trying to quote unquote get rid of someone once and for all. You know?
Yeah, unless she like it's so funny how they're like being a little vague with her tone
Yeah.
towards him, right? So cuz you feel like if she really didn't care, if she was really trying to kill him, she wouldn't go help, right?
Right.
Like I think it's more of a like she's probably just going to tell him off to be like, "Don't come back here. Like I'm
Like,
sad
I'm
and I'm
sad and
pouting.
lonely. Get out of
Yeah,
here.
let me
Yeah.
pout and get out of here. Like I don't want to be your
Yeah.
friend."
It's just a choice. It's just an interesting choice of dialogue.
It is, yeah.
Like let's get rid of him once and for all. Yeah. And yeah, and like and Voltafox here. By the way, you can also join in at any time when we do this live on Thursdays, live, and be part of the conversation. Voltafox here mentions that totally thought she wanted to kill him because of what she said. I was like, yeah, I thought like we're gonna
Yeah.
they're like there's gonna they. I mean, obviously we knew that Mando wasn't there, so there wasn't gonna be a fight. But clearly, there was something that felt like they were setting up, but turns out
Yeah.
it was just for her to tell him off.
Especially from like last week when she like
Yeah.
says goodbye, Din Djarin, so like
Right.
sinister, and I'm like, okay, like what are they trying to set up here for her, attitude towards him? But like, yeah, I don't
she's
know. It's
quite the mystery this season so far.
yeah, I think, but I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I originally was like, oh, maybe they're gonna try and set up some kind of fight, or she's gonna turn on him or something.
Oh,
but
they will fight this season. I just don't
I
know
think so
when.
too. But she had her chance to like let him
Yeah.
just die, and she didn't. So I'm like, okay. But I
That's
think that's
true.
the whole Mandalorian thing is like they want to fight, like they want to do the fight themselves. They don't want, and
Right,
not that I'm not
exactly.
saying that that's her motivation here, but
It's like, oh, he can't die. I have to kill him.
yeah, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go
Right.
help him out or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, like so I can kill him later.
Yeah, exactly. So I like how she like right away she's like, first she tries to tell him off before the cockpit's even open, which seems like an odd choice, but right away jumped into action when she sees that it's just Grogu, and she's like, download the astromech, find out where they are, and then they like basically take off immediately after. There's no really sitting around. So Panda Express 024 in the chat also mentions, are we supposed to be shipping Bo and Din after this episode? I get a mom and dad vibe when they were together with Grogu.
That is kind of cute.
Now
I don't know.
It is funny because she refers to Grogu. She refers to Din when speaking to Grogu as his dad.
His dad, which was so cute. I loved it.
Do you think your dad? And by the way, that's another line later in the episode. He's like, "Do you think your dad was the only Mandalorian?"
Yeah.
After she like kicks ass, it's like, no. Why would he think that?
No.
What do you mean? And the worst thing is, she says it, and like Grogu like barely there's like barely a reaction for her to like give the snarky line.
Well, yeah, it's like you're giving the snark line to a baby, but like you're like, bullying him.
We get it. You're cool. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's gonna be some kind of mixed feelings, love, hate. Got to fight him for the sword, but yeah.
there's a thin line between love and hate, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And
See it all the time.
you do, especially in like in media. But to answer Panda Express's question here, nothing will stop people from shipping people on
No.
television shows. So
No matter
so
how inappropriate it
exactly,
may be.
no matter especially no matter how inappropriate it may be.
This is an inappropriate ship, though, I
Or
think. But
yeah, it absolutely, this one's totally fine. And I think that's a fair question, and I hadn't considered it until now, but there is potential here for there to be like a long-term
oh yeah,
concept of, at some point in the future, Bo and Din will have some sort of relationship, and they'll like help establish Grogu as some sort of future
like
leader of Mandalore of some
okay,
kind,
interesting.
with his Mandalorian helmet that has ear holes or something. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
my god, that'd be so cute. Love it.
Couldn't hard to be
But
pressurize a helmet with ear holes, but maybe
yeah,
not.
it's not like we
Maybe not.
haven't seen like romantic things with Din before, right? Like there was
Oh yeah, that
the
woman.
the farmer woman kind of thing where they're
Yes.
like, oh, okay, and then there was the whole like Twi'lek, what's her
Oh
name?
yeah.
That they kind of referenced
Her
that they were
ex, yeah, his ex
yeah.
girlfriend.
Yeah, that they referenced that they were like a thing at some
Yeah.
point. So I'm like, it's not like it's not like he's a celibate being or anything.
No,
So yeah.
although that's a good point, because a lot of the times I feel like these like these heroes of these shows are often shown as being celibate,
Right,
or
yeah.
being
Well,
like,
like
or
the
not
Jedi for sure.
necessarily, yeah, the Jedi specifically, but like are often portrayed as people that like, oh, you don't think of them in a romantic way, and
Right.
like in this case it's like, well, maybe we can. I don't. There's a moment later in the episode that might lend some credence to this, Panda Express.
Yeah?
It's when I'll just say it now. It's when she's like staring at him as he like recites the creed as he goes into
Yeah.
the waters.
Yeah.
You know, she has this look of awe, or like she's like she looks like she's impressed with him, or like it's hard to describe what is like going across her face there, but I think that's maybe where that comes from. Okay, so they arrive at the planet, and she needs Grogu to guide her. So as they approach the city, she tells Grogu that she used to rule there. Again, this is one of those things where they really need to hammer that home for those who didn't watch any of the animated stuff. So she used to be the ruler of Mandalore for a short time. We never really get to see that. It's all kind of talked about. We kind of see her handed the Darksaber, and then things go terribly wrong
Right.
before we catch up to her again, right?
Yes. Yes.
She says that it's now just a tomb, which I think is a pretty cool concept of kind of this massive city. It's kind of like
Yeah.
Atlantis or something, like this ancient city that's lost and its history is lost, and it's a cool concept. So as they head further in, Grogu starts getting a little scared, which again, it's just weird. I feel like there's a little inconsistency about when Grogu is afraid. It's like, so he's with Bo-Katan here. Maybe he doesn't know what Bo-Katan's capable of, so as they get closer to the dangerous area, he starts getting nervous. But like, he did this whole trip on his own once already.
Yeah.
And so he seems, obviously he's capable. So anyway, she's like, I know you're scared. It just gives, I guess, Bo a chance to convince him to go forward, or have a dialogue scene.
I think it's not like maybe not necessarily that he's scared of like their current exact situation, but like he's scared for Din. Like he's worried that something bad is happening to him or has already happened. I think it's more about that. But
well, and that's fair, because I mean, it's unclear how long it took for him to get out, get back to the ship, get Bo, come back, get back down into the sewer again. So anyway, Bo convinces him to push on. He's like, I'm going to need you to help me get to him. So as they continue, she talks about how she used to know and fight alongside Jedi, which is, this is kind of like classic member berry stuff, but totally works on me, because, you think about, all the times that she and Ahsoka worked together, or Obi-Wan, and she doesn't mention them anyone by name, but we know who she's talking about.
Oh yeah,
right. She said, we were, we were basically friends at some point. I don't know how much he told you, but I'm kind of a big deal with the Jedi. And she's like, how good are you with the Force? You must be quite good, as if you're able to make it back on, all alone. And I think that we kind of have that proven. That's a little bit show and tell, which is nice. It's, we often complain the show doing too much showing or too much telling. But in this case, it kind of does a little bit of both, and we see that we saw him use the Force, and we see her talk about how he must be good with the Force if he's able to be, independent.
Right, yeah.
So
Like
yeah,
a
I think that's
regular
cool.
baby couldn't do that, obviously. So
Yeah, right. I mean, like,
yeah.
a regular, even baby who is Force sensitive wouldn't be able to do that.
No,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
did she ever meet Yoda? I guess she technically was she not on that like conference call with Yoda at the end of, or maybe not.
Maybe, I don't know. I can't remember, but
I
I
want to say
mean, probably not
no.
in person or whatever, but
Right.
yeah.
So as they're having this conversation, she pauses mid sentence. She's doing that kind of thing that Hunter does from the Bad Batch, where she gets like a sixth sense and pushes Grogu's pram.
Yeah. Shoves him out of the way.
Gives him a shove for safety.
Yeah,
shove.
yeah.
And starts shooting the ceiling with her dual blasters. By the way, I like the sound that her blasters make. This is kind of like more muted sound, and they're yellow kind of blaster bolts that come out of it. It's a cool, different look, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Starts shooting the ceiling, and more of those creatures come out. They've got, and I feel like we get a little bit of a better look at them. 4 eyes. They have tusks. They're similar in design to the mythosaur, and that's why it feels like they are kind of like these creatures that are native to the planet. Like
I didn't pick that up. Yeah.
Alamites, what they're called.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, this is why it seems a little cruel, and I was asking you about this this kind of idea that they settled Mandalore. Thousands of years, they've had these like near sentient creatures. They use weapons, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So they're essentially cavemen, and they're just left out to fend for themselves. The Mandalorians have not helped them out of like this kind of like pre-civilization state. They could easily be lifted out of that by any of these cultures.
Right.
But no, they're just savages who destroy everything. I just feel like it's a little like, I don't love it. Is my kind of
yeah. I know what you mean. Because what does she say about them? That they used to live out somewhere else,
like the wastelands,
in the
right?
wastelands. So it's like, yeah. And then now that they're kind of, yeah, but which I think that she's surprised they even survived. Which maybe that's the I don't know. Sorry. Maybe that's the excuse that they have for not saving them, is that they didn't think that they survived.
Yeah, I mean, but they don't have to be saved. Like, they probably need to be saved now. But at the time, the Mandalorians were living on the planet, and sure, it was ravaged by war. But like, there's all these like intelligent animals out there, and they're treated as like barbarians. It's like, it's so weird.
Yeah.
I just think it's an odd choice. But anyway, those are Alamites, and they look kind of cool. 4 eyes, those green eyes, kind of a cool idea. And then we get that line, "Do you ever think your dad was the only Mandalorian?" Still doesn't make sense to me. And then she mentions that if they survived, what else could have? And is that supposed to be, I guess, an allusion to the mythosaur, or that there's other Mandalorians there? It's unclear what she means by that.
I thought she kind of meant a little bit more about like, okay, so there's a life down here, so maybe I have been too cynical about it. Like, what else could have survived? But
you think she's been too cynical? Yeah, the queen of cynicism
but,
over here.
Yeah, at the same time, she's also being like, okay, well, what else is like lurking around here? Like, what is worse that could be down here too? So.
Right. So back with Mando, we see the cyborg stick him with a tube and start draining him of all his fluids. Really
So
gross, but really cool of a concept. And like,
that is my nightmare.
being drained of fluids.
Yeah, that's like for sure one of like my like like it's anytime I see.
As far as ways to go, there's worse ways, because I feel like you pass out and then just never wake up.
Yeah, I guess, but I'm just, as someone who's not a fan of like needles and that kind of stuff, I'm like, no, that is torture to me, of you sticking me with tubes and sucking out all my insides.
Hate being stuck with tubes.
Just kill me first. Like, why keep me alive?
Maybe it tastes better that way. I don't
Ew,
know.
yeah.
So Bo arrives to save him, and she uses the Darksaber to take out the cyborg.
Yeah.
And like makes short work of it.
Yeah, she does. Like, just, yeah. And that's so funny too, when you see like how much of a struggle Mando has with it, the
Yeah.
dark saber, and then like how comfortable Bo-Katan is. But like obviously she's comfortable because she wielded it for a while. Like
Well, that and she knew she knew Jedi, so she was
yes,
able to
yeah,
like consult with them. Probably remember, like obviously it makes you think of um, uh, uh, Rebels and
yeah,
when
like
Sabine was
Sabine,
learning and like
yeah,
how she talks about it being feeling heavier than it looks and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. And they really leaned into that, obviously. And that's not that's not an accident. But I I do think it's interesting that like they're obviously telling you something again, showing you
Oh
through
yeah,
action that she is very capable at wielding this
super
the dark
capable.
saber.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'm wondering if maybe we'll get a little bit of maybe she's maybe after this whole scenario like she comes around, right? And maybe she wants to like help Din learn how to use it or learn how
maybe
to wield it. Either
that
that
would be
like
an
or
that
maybe she's just going to try and kick his ass and take it back, but
maybe. I mean, and the thing is, like, you don't have to kill the person in combat
no,
to
you
win
don't.
the saber. So
No.
you could just she
Beat them.
clearly could beat him in combat. I did like she's clearly a badass.
No.
So
I
and
feel
I
like
think
and
that's the
that's
other
the
thing.
thing too.
Yeah,
If she had like another weapon that whatever you can fight with a dark saber, um I think she knows she could kick his ass when he has it, like cuz he doesn't know how to wield it. So maybe that's
yeah.
part of it,
Well,
like
I don't think
she'll
she even
teach him
needs.
how to
She has
use
that
it.
shield. She doesn't need another weapon.
Yeah, that's true.
She has that shield on her arm, which is cool. I don't think we've seen that in live
Yeah.
action yet on her. Something we
True.
have seen her use in the animated form
Yeah.
before, and I just think it is really nice to see because we've seen her be badass in the animated form, and sometimes the things that they pull off in animation feels a
Oh,
little
like
bit like
well,
okay,
yeah.
sure, but like
In real life, the actors can't do that,
there's no
but
way they could do that. But in this case, it's
yeah.
like, well, they really make it feel like those things that they did in animation
Oh,
could be
absolutely.
done, and I think that's really cool. And
Yeah.
I think it makes her really feel very empowered. And
Yeah.
my girlfriend mentioned like they released this on International Women's Day, and I was like, yeah, I think that might be a
Oh.
coincidence,
Yeah.
but
I'm just
but
having Bo-Katan kicking
like
ass, but
yeah, like I think
yeah.
we're talking about Boonta Eve here. It's not about International Women's Day,
Yeah.
but
But I don't know. I mean, like, I wouldn't be mad if we saw like a small, not an arc, but like a small storyline of her teaching Din how to use that
it
saber
would be
until he's
wholesome.
good enough at it that she's like, okay, now I can like challenge you and not feel like it's too
Sure.
easy to take it from you, right?
Yeah. Well,
So,
also like again, that would be the most wholesome way to go about it. I don't
yeah,
know if that'll
you
be the
train
one,
someone up
but
and
it'll
you're
be
like, all
nice.
right, you got to fight me for real now, and like
Right.
the winner keeps
Winner
the
keeps
saber.
all. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And like he doesn't even want it,
no,
right?
he
I
doesn't, and
don't
that's the
want
thing.
it.
It's just kind of, yeah. He
Don't
tried to give
want
it to
it.
her already, but
Yeah. So, while she this is so funny. So she's like helping free Mando, and she's like, "It's me, Bo-Katan."
yeah,
It's like I know you sent Grogu to get him. So she's like helping him out, and he's like, "Are you trying to say something? What is it you're trying to say?" Um, it's like behind you, and it turns out the cyborg head crawled away as like a little so gross looking, and then
yeah,
like climbed into the crab machine and then attacks her with the crab machine. But then but again, makes short work of even the crab machine with the dark saber. Like
yeah,
it's wild how effective it is at dealing with any droid type part.
yeah.
So they will not hesitate to show you droids being chopped to pieces by
Oh yeah, I
lightsabers.
can slice them right up. But
Yeah.
no, I did like that little how that little thing scoots away. It kind of looks like a horseshoe crab. Have you ever seen those things?
No, I don't like crabs. They remind me of spiders, and I
Well,
don't like
okay,
working with them.
they don't look like a crab. Horseshoe crabs kind of look like a I don't know. Do you know what like a trilobite is, or like what
Yes.
sea
Yeah. Yeah.
monkeys
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah.
It kind of
Yeah.
looks like that
Uh huh.
almost. So it has like a hard shell. You always see their
And
like
like little
shells on
teeny
the beach
legs.
and stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
creepy little legs. But yeah, so you see it scooting away. It looks like yeah, like again, it liked its
Im-
gross eye,
and
and
impressive how good it looked. I think that
yeah,
can't be
right, like
understated, right?
doing a good job with that CG.
Mm-hmm. So Mando and Bo then have lunch over a fire, and have a little chat. And she says that hey, Grogu guided her there. He's tougher than he looks, and quite the navigator. So I think it's nice that like she's kind of having she had a little bonding moment of her own with Grogu, and he thanks her for rescuing him. She says that she was right about the planet not being cursed, but she's not so convinced. She's like, really though? Because look around, this was a great society, and now it's just a memory, right? And
Right.
just a memory to those who still remember it, because in a generation's time, there'll be no one left who even remembers what it was like when it was,
Yeah.
a big city and people were living in it.
Well, Din even said he'd never been there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's because he was in exile, though.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So that's a different reason. So she gives him pog soup, which I don't know what that is. Have we seen pogs before? I don't know.
I don't know.
And
When they first said it, I thought they meant like porg.
I thought
And
they
I was
meant
like,
porg
oh.
soup too, and I thought that would have been
I
hilarious.
was like, that is funny, but pog soup, yeah, I don't know. But
I just imagine. I just can't stop imagining a porg though. So
they just need to come up with like more things that they can serve at Galaxy's Edge.
you're right. This is another one of those. So it's pog soup.
Disney's
which
like,
is
perfect. Put
Yeah.
that on the menu. It's $30.
Well, you're lucky if it's $30.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, traditional Mandalorian food,
Yeah.
and she's like, "Can you appreciate the irony of having someone who I kind of didn't really get what she was going for here, which is like, isn't it weird? Isn't it funny? Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? How you've never had this before, yet you wield the dark saber, basically, right? You have the
Right,
thing
yeah.
that is supposed
Rules
to be
Mandalore.
the rules Mandalore, but you've never had traditional baby soup.
Yeah,
Mandalorian
you've
baby
never
soup.
had
Yeah.
the most famous dish on Mandalore, I guess. But
Right.
yeah,
So anyway, it's just an interesting thing. I do like her whole bit about the memory thing, and she really drives that home. So he's like, "Well, I've never had it before. Thanks for the soup, but I gotta go. There's this whole ceremony I still have to figure out, right?" And she's kind of still surprised that he wants to go back. He's like, "Really? After all that, you still want to go through this?" And he kind of makes this point that it's like, "Well, listen, I have to do this because I'm being exiled by the only people that I've ever considered family,
right.
and without the creed, what are we?" Which it does feel like a little bit of an abstract form of that same idea. And it's like it gives us purpose, and it gives me purpose, so it feels right, you know. And I think that resonates with her, so she actually agrees to take him. She's like, "Listen, I'll take you because this is dumb anyway. You'll see how dumb it is, and then you'll be all jaded like me."
Yeah.
You know. Anything else you want to add about this little like convo, like lunch chat that they have?
No, I just like I don't know. I enjoyed it. Like I kind of like these moments where they're kind of going back and forth with their own ideas about Mandalore, right? So
Sure.
and getting a little bit more like behind the scenes about what life there was kind of like for her.
Mm-hmm. It's just a shame. I mean, maybe we'll see it in some sort of animated form or something, or some other book or something. But it would be nice to get learn more about her time as the ruler.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I almost thought we'd get like a flashback to that, like the city in its prime in live action. I think that would be really cool.
Right.
It's
I
possible
wouldn't
that
be
they'll still do
I
that.
would not be like surprised if we got like a book out of it more so than anything.
Sure.
I would like I feel like that would be probably pretty good like novel content or like, comic/graphic novel
Sure.
content, but
So as they walk along the roadway in the destroyed city, they talk about the old civilization. I thought this is cool because it really feels like the same little like patch of road that like Ahsoka and her walked on after, before Order 66,
right, yeah.
So that's really cool to me. It really does feel like a realized version, real live action realization of that domed city. And I always thought it was cool because what was unique about these domed cities was that they had buildings coming out from the top and the bottom. So like they buildings grew up and then down. And then
Yes,
they had
yeah.
these like this very like verticalized city. So you could have, there's multiple levels and layers, but lots of light. I just think it was always a really cool design.
Yeah. Well, there's also all those like tunnels too that like they were
Exactly.
running around in Clone Wars.
Yeah,
From Maul
totally.
and stuff too.
And I think they used some similar design philosophy when they were designing the tunnels that they were going into in this episode. To
I
kind of
think
make
so
it feel
too.
similar.
That's what we were curious about. I was like, oh, I wonder if any of those are like the same like tunnel system that,
Yeah, almost certainly.
you see.
Right?
But
Almost
yeah.
certainly. Okay, so they talk about how it must be a pain to see all this destruction, having known, what its previous glory. But she's really more hurt about the fact that there's still all this infighting among Mandalorians, and that it's the reason that the Empire was able to destroy them in the way that they did, and it's the reason that the planet was, I mean, also a wasteland before they ever destroyed it. So I think that's a fair thing to be kind of regretful about.
Yeah.
Considering she was, and again, this is the other thing. She's being very open about her time as a leader and all this other stuff, but she's not really revealed that she was a founding member of or whatever. Maybe not founding member, but like a lieutenant in Death Watch.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that would like endear them a lot, but I feel like she maybe feels very regretful about that and doesn't want
I
to
think
talk
so
about it.
too. Yeah. And I do feel like that was a short time in her life that she was part of Death Watch.
Sure.
Like, it's not like she was part of Death Watch for like 20 years or anything. I think she left her family like when Satine, like the Duchess, was in charge.
Sure.
And went and joined Death Watch, and then all that shit with Maul happened like a little bit later on. So I feel like she was only part of Death Watch for like a few years. I can't see her have been like, I don't think she was part of Death Watch for like a decade or anything like that.
But she had such stark, distinct like differences between the way her pacifist sister wanted to approach things, and really like that was the closest they ever came to being a united people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's interesting that she kind of has that stance now. I mean, we all change as we get older, but it's interesting to see. So they do find the actual correct entrance, and it's like way more impressive of an entrance to the mines than the sewers that they entered before.
Really cool looking.
Right? And so we see that the mines are quite old, hundreds of years old and thousands of years old, and just kind of looks like just a big cave. And she talks about how she's been there before, how she, I was a member of the royal family, so, we did this whole ceremony where I took the creed, but it was all more, theatrical, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just kind of like you would do it so that the people would be, it's kind of like the royal family, like the British royal family now, like they do all these ceremony things. They don't really do anything anymore, but
it's for show. It's to be like, oh, look, we're participating in this part of the religion, but they don't actually like necessarily believe all of it. It's just, again, it's like participating in a baptism or something, like in a religious ceremony for your family that maybe it's just more for show than it is for anything else, right?
But I think it's interesting that the creed speaks of never removing your helmet, and maybe and maybe the full creed doesn't, and that they've added that element as part of like, or maybe it's more traditional and they removed it as a part of the ceremony.
Yeah,
but
I mean, all those kind of traditions change even in our own lives with things, right? So there's probably there's probably like the base creed for all Mandalorians, and then the ones that are a little bit stronger.
Well, I imagine maybe so they're using the one that Mando had to take was probably more of like an original version.
Yeah,
right? And then the one that she was doing for her ceremonial version was more kind of like, you just say these few words and everyone, and take a dip in the pool and everyone's happy.
It's more performative kind of thing. Yeah.
So she talks about how her father, she did this in front of her father, and she was like, I always would try to be, impress him, and he was proud of me, and that he was a great man. And that he died defending Mandalore. And we don't know how, and I think there's another example of a opportunity to explore this in another way. I think there's just more of the Mandalorian past could be explored, so who knows. And that's when, Mando does this like nice little tribute to her dad and says, I wish I could have known him. And when she mentions that he died fighting for Mandalore, he's like, this is the way. He says it in this kind of like all choked up way, and it's like very, I thought it was very effective. It worked for me. And then, then you get this line from Bo. It's like, "What are you looking at?" Talking to Grogu. I guess I guess the idea being that like Grogu is kind of like, "Oh, look, they're having a little moment."
Yeah. They're like, "Oh, look at you two having a nice little chat. Look at you two getting along."
Yeah, I know. It's funny. So that one actually made sense to me. The other one's not so much. So they arrive at the Living Waters, and she wants to give him the full tour. And she's kind of like very bemused and like kind of in a pretty good mood here, actually. And like, very pleasant. And she's like, well, I don't want to. You don't want to just see them. I have to give you the little like the little spiel. So she reads the plaque, and the plaque says, "These mines date back to the age of the first Mandalore. According to ancient folklore, the mines were once a mythosaur lair. Mandalore the Great is said to have tamed the mythical beast. It is from these legends that the skull signet was adopted and became the symbol of our planet. So this is all written in Mandoan, and I think it's
Mhm.
really cool because it's just like it's a great way to get exposition out. I always look for a great way to give exposition without it feeling clunky,
Yeah, and,
right?
like,
And this is one of them.
I like the way that she delivers it too because she kinda delivers it like it's like, "Oh, it's a story." Like, this
Yeah,
is just one of those tall tales that they tell you, and it's, like, obviously, like, not real, right, to her. Um,
yeah, and it's called a mythosaur, which is like
yeah.
myth is right in the name, you
Yeah.
know?
Like, she's like, "Okay, this is a story that, like, your grandpa would tell you and, like, your family passes down. You tell little kids."
Right,
It's
and it
not.
says folklore in here, and it says,
Yeah.
according to ancient folklore,
Yeah.
you know, the mines were once a mythosaur lair, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but she's reading it as if it's like, "Oh, it's the like, this is kind of a joke," or "This is kind of a." Yeah, but, like, bemused is a really good
Well,
word to
it's like
use.
it's this idea of like, hey, that we were told all these things that gave it like this larger than life feel.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
you've always had this like you need to go here to have to do this ceremony, and fair enough. So I'll give you all the juicy
Yeah.
tidbits you need to make it feel bigger than it is,
Yeah.
right?
She's
Because to
just
her,
like,
she's jaded, and it's just a pool,
yeah.
right?
She's like, "Okay, weirdo, go crawl in there." Like,
Right. So she's reading it,
"Go have
and
your
then she's
bath."
like, Din doesn't say anything, and he's kind of like staring out at the waters, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And then he doesn't respond, and starts like removing his gear. And I thought he was gonna like remove a bunch more stuff, but
I
he
thought so
literally
too,
just
but
takes
no.
off his blanket and like his like rocket pack, and that's basically
Yeah.
it. And gets in the water and starts walking in and starts swearing the oath. Say, I swear on my name and the names of my ancestors that I shall walk the way of the Mandalore, and the words of the creed have forever be forged in my heart. But he doesn't finish. He isn't really able to finish his sentence. And again, this is what I was talking about before. The way that Bo like looks at him while he's kind of like having this religious moment is really interesting. It's one of these kind of things where it's like the look that someone gives a leader, or that look that someone gives someone that's like, wow, this guy is feeling something that I wish I could feel, or experiencing
Yeah.
things in a different way that I've never seen before, and it's impressive. So, I thought that was really cool, but I think her reaction to that initially will be to kind of like shove that down and like kind of probably lash out instead of accept those feelings, which is
Right.
much more her style.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely thought that she kind of, like, softened a little bit here, like, it was less like a, she's kinda not teasing him, but being, like, thinking
Hmm.
he's wacky for this kinda stuff, but then when she
Sure.
actually sees him, like, participating in it, she's kinda like, "Oh, okay, he's actually, like,
That's
really
not so bad. Yeah.
not so bad, he's actually pretty serious about this," and, like, "Alright, like, this is kind of, like, unique," right? Like, it's,
Hmm.
when you see somebody who actually believes in something that you kind of always laughed off, right? So
Yeah, it's
but,
like you want to give them their space to be and be
yeah, to
respectful.
be respectful, yeah, and it's like, "Oh, okay, like, alright, I'll just let him do his thing," but this is kinda I get it, like, maybe she's kinda thinking, like, "Okay, maybe I get where he's coming from now," like,
Right. So he doesn't finish his sentence. He gets pulled under the water. This is a
of
classic.
course.
Anytime the water is dark and murky black,
Oh, yeah.
someone's going to get pulled underneath. And I like how Bo, just like the first time they met, right, jumps into action, jumps into the water, right, puts her helmet on, and like goes to look for him, tries to find him. And like turns
Mhm.
out this thing is way deeper than it
So
looks.
deep,
It's so
yeah.
crazy how deep it is.
Were you worried not worried at all, but, like, when they were first going to find the living waters, like, not necessarily worried, but, like, "Oh, I hope it's not, like, a disappointing thing for him that he shows up and it's just like, see, it's just like a trickling stream now," or it's just
Right.
like, it's not that impressive, but it was really cool that this was actually, like, a
Oh yeah, it's like a
huge cavern and,
yeah,
like,
it's really
yeah,
cool. I agree. I mean, at first it doesn't look that impressive. It kind of does
no.
look a lot like
But
the Mines of
yeah.
Moria in a couple places, but in this case, it's like the less impressive parts of the Mines of
But yeah,
Moria.
as soon as she jumps in there and you're like, "Holy shit, this is, like, crazy deep." It's like a
Yeah, it's like an
full-blown
iceberg where it's like bigger
lake.
underneath than it is on top.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so she goes and she like keeps swimming, keeps swimming. She has her light on. She can't find him. She turns her light off, and okay, there he is. Goes and gets him, and then as she's pulling him back up, we see this first person perspective, and it looks like she's coming up along this cliff. But then we see eyes,
An eye, yeah.
and then I love how by the way she gasps. There's like
Yeah.
this, and then bubbles escape. We see that in the with the subtitles on,
Mhm.
and it pulls out even further as she kind of like backs away, and we see that it's a fucking mythosaur.
And it's
And
huge.
it's way bigger than I thought. It's
Yeah.
way bigger than I
Which
thought it
is
would be.
always amazing when
Yeah,
something
the
is and, like,
scale.
they're kind of they tease this, right? Like, they tease it in the intro when they're, like they bring up a mythosaur, and then they tease it that she's reading this whole thing about, "Oh, he was said to be a mythosaur lair, and he tamed it." And then,
Well, and
yeah,
they
they go down there, and there's actually a huge fucking mythosaur down there.
yeah, and I think they even give you a red herring last week with the I think what they call it a dinosaur turtle. So in this
Yes.
case, it's like another one of these like okay, a couple misdirections, and we're gonna remind you of the mythosaur just so that you know what it is when you see it.
Yeah,
But
but it's
holy crap, way bigger than I
giant.
thought, and also like like was it the mythosaur that pulled him in,
I don't know.
or
Yeah,
was
because
it
it
like
doesn't do anything.
it
It just
doesn't do anything?
yeah, it just
Yeah,
looks at them and kinda turns away, and you're like, "Whoa, okay," like, it's not trying to eat them right away, like, that's kinda cool. I'm like,
and it's no one ever saw this creature before, like
"He's just
for
hanging
thousands
out
of years,
down
or
there."
maybe when the thing got, maybe when the planet got exploded, it kind of like came back up to the surface or
Well, yeah,
something.
it got awoken from, like, the depths of, like,
Yeah,
wherever, but yeah, it's, like,
that's
so cool. Well, it's
man.
kinda
Now I
one of
want to
those
see a
things
mythosaur
too.
versus a Zillo beast. You
Zillow
know?
Beast, yeah. No, it was really cool, and, like, I love how big they made it because I saw a tweet or something today, and it was someone like, "Oh, what we thought the size of Mrs. Thor or mythosaurs were,"
Right.
and it was, like, around, like, a bantha, kinda, like, a little bit bigger than a
Sure.
bantha, obviously, but, like, something that you could, like, sit on top of and, like,
Mm-hmm.
ride. But then it's, like, what it actually is, and, like, they're so
It's
tiny
fucking
compared to its
Godzilla.
face, like, it's massive.
It's
Yeah.
fucking Godzilla. So I always felt like the show. I feel like I've even mentioned it on our podcast before that the show was going to introduce mythosaurs back into
Yeah.
the whole thing. That it
Yeah,
was
so
coming,
cool.
right? And so in this case, it's like the way that they did it is so awesome
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it reveals the scale without giving away. Like it really does that kind of like horror monster trope
Yeah.
methodology. I
Well,
think it's
especially
really good. Well
because you
done.
only get to see its head, so, like, you don't get actually
Yeah,
even get to see how
I
big its
know.
body
What
is,
if it,
so,
the
like
body's really tiny and it's just like a big head and it's small body?
could you imagine?
Yeah,
But,
it's
yeah,
funny.
so it's like, oh, we haven't even seen the whole thing yet, so, like, that's also, like, something to look forward to or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like, obviously, now, Bo-Katan's gonna be like, "Holy shit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not
This
just a
really changes.
story."
Yeah, what does that
Yeah.
mean for her? I think that's a
What
great
does it
point. I didn't
mean?
even consider that. Like
Yeah.
that should completely like rock her world,
Oh,
right?
yeah. It's gonna, like, completely be like, "What the fuck? Okay, so there's a mythosaur down here? Like, this wasn't just a story, like, it
Right.
can kind of, like, bring that, Mandalorian culture kinda, like, just slamming back into her, right? Being like, "Okay, maybe Din isn't crazy with his creed and all that, so
Right. But
she might
also,
be a
what
little
does
more
it mean?
accepting."
Like, what does it mean to know there's a mythosaur there? Like, or at some point, is someone gonna ride one? Maybe, but
Ah, that'd be
like,
amazing.
but
Gonna tame it.
there's no one on Mandalore. Mandalore's abandoned. Like, there's no one there. So, like, are they gonna? How are they gonna get? Are they gonna remove it from the planet? Probably not. Right. So
Yeah.
it's like I don't know. That there's still I guess there's a lot of question marks. We're still only 2 episodes in. This season's moving way faster than I thought. Actually, that's not true. It's moving about as fast as I thought. Remember I said that there this whole like go bathing in the waters of living waters was going to
Mhm.
be like 2 episodes and we'd be done with it. So
Right.
we're 2 episodes and we're technically done with it.
Yeah, it was
So
quick.
now
It
what does
moved
it
along
mean?
really quick.
Okay, go back and talk to the armorer, bring Bo-Katan and be like, "Yo, check out this shit we just saw. It's
Yeah.
wild." Right? So, yeah.
And that's the thing, it's like, was Din awake? Did he see it? Was he knocked
Oh,
out?
yeah, I don't
Like
think he was. That's a good point,
yeah.
actually.
So it's like, is it just Bo-Katan who's seen the Smythosaur and that he's not gonna believe her? Or
Yeah,
like what? Yeah.
he was knocked out a lot, actually, this episode.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, so quickly, overall thoughts on this episode.
Oh, I loved it. I really liked it. And I think I was like kinda how you just said, I really enjoyed that they did this quickly because they
Let's
very
get to it already.
easily could have stretched this out over 2 episodes, like and they didn't, and I really appreciate them being like, "Okay, mine's Mandalore. Let's get there. We're gonna do this," and then boom, Mythosaur. So
Yeah, like I feel like I thought this episode was going to end after she saved him his life the first time.
right, yeah,
And
and
we're
they
done,
easily could
right?
have, and then it
Yeah.
starts at the next point, right? But yeah, you're right. So I'm like, okay, sweet. Like they're really like they're moving with this
It's
show.
a great place to end it, like,
Yeah.
and be like, okay, what happens next? There's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
So very
I'm like-
excited. I also like this episode much more than the first. The first episode felt too much like, place setting, things, retreading things we already knew.
Mm-hmm.
Felt a little clunky in its pacing. This was much better paced. It had much more, the dialogue was more interesting. The character examinations more interesting. We get to see, there's more showing and telling. And then there's this big reveal that actually, expands the whole mythology of the show and it asks all these big questions. And that is interesting. So, yeah, I think this is a good episode. Very impressed. What does IMDb think about this episode? Let's find out. 9 out of 10. This is featured review is from Darius M. Bowen. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Okay. It says, way better than the first episode. See? It's so good and well done. I did not really liked the beginning. And so this is the feature review. It's full of typos and errors. I didn't really like the beginning. Not the idea, but the rest of the episode is just pure gold. I guess he said he didn't really like the beginning of the episode with, I guess, maybe Tatooine stuff.
Oh, okay.
Even when I predicted the scenery, it did not let me down. What is happening? Okay, so he's saying, I have to interpret this whole thing. He's saying, we'd heard about what happened to Mandalore, so we have to imagine what it looked like, and then they showed us for real, and it was not a letdown. And I agree with that.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
The suspense is there. The action is amazing. The visuals are amazing. Agreed. The actors are killing it. Grogu is amazing, and I really like what they did with him in this episode. Agreed. He felt like he had more his own. He's able to be more of his own character here, which is good.
Absolutely,
more agency. Okay, so to clarify something, the start of the episode is not. This is so funny the way he's written this. Like, teases this idea at the beginning, then comes back to it. To clarify, the start of the episode is not that well made, but is just 2 to 3 minutes. Then you go to explore. It's an exploring episode. You get to see the connections from the events from the Clone Wars show and where all that went and how it fits in the story. It's interesting from the start to the end, but not the start. How it just had 2 upvotes. I think that's all it takes to be the feature review. I feel like we should be writing these and just voting ourselves into feature review on IMDb. Because man, half of it didn't even make sense.
I'm gonna make a note to myself to make an IMDb account. I don't know what that entails, but
I don't think it's hard. I think it's pretty easy. Okay, that's wild. All right, so we're gonna take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll do the Bad Batch. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to be talking about Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 12, The Outpost. And looking forward to talking about this one. This one is another very good episode.
Yeah.
One of the best of the season. Someone was saying I've seen the best episode of The Bad Batch yet. I wouldn't go that far personally, but I can see why that might be the case for some. So
Yeah, it's definitely up there. Again, this is another one of those things where it's kind of unfortunate that one of the best episodes doesn't have the Bad Batch in it.
titular characters in it. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. We can kind of count Crosshair sort of as them.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He's technically a part of the Bad. He mentions the Clone Force 99 in this episode.
Yeah,
so.
Good to see Crosshair back because we haven't seen him since episode 2. So
yeah,
it's been like such a huge like break, right? Like
it feels like a long time, and I think it's on purpose. Like he's just been floundering there, and it's just. I think we're supposed to get the sense that like he's just not been able to really live a fulfilling life over these last few months.
He seems just like dejected. Like he's just been treated like absolute trash over the last little while. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Panda Express mentions that they knew it would be good once they saw Crosshair. And I think that's totally fair. We've saw, this episode 2 is one of the best ones. I think I like episode 2 more than this one personally. And I'll get into maybe why as we go here, but
is it because Cody's in it?
Well, that's a big part of it. I do love Cody, but I also love Mayday. I think Mayday is really cool.
Mayday was so cool. Like I was bummed that he, we only get him for one episode, but he was
they're taking the Last of Us approach where they introduce a cool character and then kill them in the same episode.
Yeah. Spoilers. Have not watched that show yet.
Spoilers for Last of Us. Lots of people die in that show.
Yeah. But no, he had a cool name. He had a really cool look. I was like, he sounded obviously exactly like Rex, but
yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah.
So I know I felt like he actually was a little different than Rex. He had a little bit more of there's more of a casualness to him, I think.
Yeah.
So, this episode's logline is: a new friend is made on a harsh and unforgiving outpost planet. It's written by directed by Brad Rao and Nathaniel Villanueva, written by Dave Filoni and Jennifer Corbett, as every episode has been. I should mention, by the way, the Mandalorian episode written by Jon Favreau, directed by Rachel Morrison. So we did mention that before. There is Crispin Freeman plays Lieutenant Nolan. That's really the new standout cast member here. Crispin Freeman and Lieutenant Nolan, obviously a character you'd love to hate. And
such an odd name. No offense
Nolan?
to that guy. Crispin.
Well, there's what about Crispin Glover? That's not like it's just I think it's I don't know what culture it's from, but it's not completely crazy to me.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm just looking at his IMDb here. Played Roy Harper, Red Arrow on Young Justice. Great show, Young Justice. Lots of video game work. Ghost in the Shell, Overwatch 2, voice of Winston in Overwatch 2. Winston. It's good. It's my dog's name.
Yeah.
And amongst other things, lots of credits to this actor's name, but quite young. And does a great job here. Plays a great villain.
Yeah.
Say.
Oh yeah.
So, I lost my spot. Crap. All right. So we start on Coruscant, and the military base that we've seen kind of now in a couple episodes. We've seen it many times. We've seen it in the Clone Wars, and we've seen it now a few times in the Bad Batch here, and it's filled with TK troopers who are basically taking over. There's still a few clones lingering around, and Crosshair is waiting with a few of them next to a transport ship. And the clones that they're hanging out with are kind of like chatting with themselves, and they're kind of thankful to be on a field mission. We see some other clones in civilian clothing who are being escorted basically off the base, who are being forced to retire. When this is kind of a follow-on to the stuff we saw a couple episodes back about the new budget, the new recruitment bill.
Yeah.
And, it is kind of sad. I mean, we kind of got the same kind of sentiment we saw expressed or explored in those two back-to-back episodes about how, they are being forced to retire. They don't really know any other life. They don't want to retire. And I think they'll continue to explore that concept. Something that someone mentioned on Twitter, and it's quite dark when you think about it, which is this idea that like, what if the clones have like they have that like they had Order 66 chip implanted? What if they have like a
Yeah.
kill switch chip
Oof.
implanted, and that's how we end up with like no clones left over?
I mean, maybe, but like we see a clone in poverty
Yeah,
in
in Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think I don't know if they would actually like have a kill switch like that because I think we would have seen that. Um,
Yeah, but there's like barely any at that
it's
time.
true. That's
You know?
true. Yeah, it's well, I think it's also like a lot of these things where they just used them until they died and like didn't care, threw them on these
Right.
dangerous missions, and like used them as a not a commodity, but like how does he word
Expendable.
it? Expendable, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, is it a dangerous mission? Oh, don't worry about sending the clone or the trooper
The
units,
TK
like the
troopers.
TK
Yeah.
troopers, send the clone troopers because who cares if they come back or not, right? So,
Yeah.
and man, like even when those troopers or the clone troopers are walking and they're talking to whatever guy that is,
Uh
uh,
huh.
and he's just telling them like, oh well, just take it up with blah blah blah, and it's
Oh,
just
they're
like,
talking. It's a woman actually. It's an Imperial like
oh, is it
officer,
okay?
and she's
Yeah,
like, yeah, I think the line is direct all your questions to the Imperial Information Bureau.
yeah, which is just kind of
Right.
like,
Well,
yeah,
just passing the buck.
go
Yeah.
read the website. Like it's
Right.
just man, like yeah, it such a bummer. And like Crosshair's overhearing that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah.
Yeah. So this I mean it all comes to a head in this episode, but this whole thing about like he put his faith in the institution, and
Mhm.
now the institution is not has put zero faith in him. Well, has given up any faith that they've had in the clones, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
gone one further and is now kind of abandoning them. And so he's feeling, I think, uh, shame probably
Oh,
for
for
this kind of
sure.
choice to stay behind and kind of abandon his family for an institution that he thought that he belonged to when
Yeah.
they're and again, of course, I think Mayday says it kind of plainly later in the episode, but a surprise to me is how wildly tonally different these episodes are from one another,
Right?
right? Like
Yeah.
we went from
Yeah.
episode 2, which had this like poignant moment where Crosshair shoots that innocent woman,
Yeah.
to the next episode being faster, which we really make fun of a lot, but it's like really funny to have that be the next. Well, maybe that wasn't the next one or was the one after. It's unclear, but um, it's like, oh, this is a lighthearted kids show, and then it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
a lighthearted kids show at all. Like this is not like I don't think a kid would be bored with this episode,
Oh, for
you know.
sure. Yeah.
So it's like I just
It's
like I don't know how you like what's happening here. Is Lucasfilm smuggling in these episodes that they want to tell that are more mature into a kids show that they sold to Disney as a kids show, or have they always kind of positioned this as something that's going to be a bit of both?
a bit of
Because
both, yeah. I mean,
I don't
that's
know,
kind of
it's
like how the
fascinating.
Clone Wars was though. Like
I never really feel like it got this dark, to
no,
be
I don't
honest.
think it was that like dramatic of a difference, but like you definitely had more like fun, lighthearted, whatever episodes of Clone Wars and then more
Sure,
serious ones. So,
this just feels like such
yeah.
a start. Like this just feels so wildly different
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the same show that and again the choice to like not include the main cast in that I think is like is very telling, because it's like, okay,
Yeah.
we feel like we can tell these stories, and they say they did that last season with the stuff on the Twilight Homeworld, right? And it was like the Bad Batch were barely a part of that arc, but it was some of the darkest stuff. It was some of the most dramatic stuff was in those seasons.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, why does this show feel like it can tell these stories without the titular characters in it, but it can't with them? And is it just because Omega's there? And if that's the case, you know, why tell these more mature stories at all in a show called The Bad Batch? And I'm not that I'm complaining. I just find it very confusing.
I know what you
From a
mean. Yeah,
tonally
how
confusing.
it's tonally, yeah, from one episode to the next, there is no consistency. We don't really
No.
know whether we're gonna get kind of like super fun time, whatever, or whether it's gonna be like serious, dark, like and dealing with serious kind of like tones and content and that kind of stuff,
Sure.
right? Because this is very different than some of the more like fluffier fun episodes, but
Yeah. So here, this is, I feel like, a good opportunity to read the IMDb review. So this is from Mattia Dixiong. Oh man, I've got just brutal on these names. So what an episode! It's called title. Sorry, first of all, let me back up. The title is maybe the most emotional animated episode ever. Now, I've seen some people make this comment about like, oh, they were just like bawling, or it's like it did not hit me emotionally. I kind of wanted it to. Like I was ready for it to. You know me.
yeah.
I'll cry at the drop of a hat. But this
Yeah.
did not evoke that feeling for
No.
me. And I maybe because I've like a lot of my feelings for poor treatment of clones has already been kind of used up
Right.
to some degree, and I'm kind of maybe jaded or something. But
Do
again, it didn't hit me that
do
way.
they mean like in Star Wars as a whole or just in Bad Batch?
They said animated episode ever.
No. Are you kidding me? Have you watched Rebels?
Well, yeah. There's that. Yeah, of course, the moment with
It's
Kanan. Not to
oh,
reveal it anything, but yeah,
there's
it's quite
there's so
impressive.
many things, and then there's so many points in the Clone Wars too that near the end there that
I
are
never
like
really. I mean, sure. I think near the closer to the end when they got a little bit better at being more mature, better at
I don't know.
conveying
Yeah,
emotion.
like the
But
Duchess, like the Satine arc is sad as shit. Like it's like there's so much. Yeah, no, this person is wrong. I'm sorry. This
okay,
is not
fair
the
enough.
most sad episode of animated Star Wars
They
ever.
said, to be fair, they said maybe the most
Maybe.
emotional episode.
Yeah.
So
I was like, I
what
don't
an
think you've
episode.
watched enough of the animated
go do your
content.
homework. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what an episode. Quite simply, I got emotional. We
Yeah.
get introduced to a fantastic clone. Mayday and his literal journey drives this excellent story. We get Crosshair back, and his progression has been a highlight of the season. Well, I mean, there's only been 2 episodes. We get the fallout of the Emperor's decision a couple of episodes back, and I just wish we spent the whole season on the clones and on their post-Clone Wars tragic treatment.
Me too.
Agree. I think that's a missed opportunity here.
Yeah.
Instead of all the boring stuff with Sid.
Yeah. I agree. I would have taken 10% Sid content and like all the rest to be more. But I get it if it's if you're trying to float this as a kid show, that isn't interesting to kids. I don't know, but is it a kid show? It doesn't feel like it. Are kids watching this? I don't think kids are. I think adults are watching it. I think it's us. Like is the majority of the.
I mean, I think it's probably both now, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a lighthearted mission of the week episode. This is this has real stakes, real consequences, and a real impact. I agree with that. Watch it and enjoy one of the best animated Star Wars episodes ever, and probably the comfortable best of the series so far. Haunting episode. I don't know. I still feel like I like season episode 2 more, but
I would agree with you on that. Like I really like this episode, but I mean, yeah, it had a lot of weight to it, and it had definitely a lot of like kind of character development that we get with Crosshair, because I think from episode 2 to this one, he's a very different character. From the end of that episode 2 to the end of this episode, it's like he's gone through the ringer, I think, in between, and like you said, feeling very
I think he's reaching out for some type of connection, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
He lost his unit, his family, right? And then he feels like, okay, well then I will put my faith in the institution, and then the institution treats him like shit.
Yeah.
And then he has this moment of bonding with Cody.
Yeah.
Where they go on this mission together, and it's this kind of Funhouse mirror version of a Clone Wars episode of going on this mission and taking down clankers and all this stuff. And then
but even in that episode, it's like he has these moments with Cody, but then he still kind of reverts back to.
Well, exactly. He's the one who feels like he's detached enough to be able to do to make the hard choices.
Yeah,
right?
He's still doing the Empire's bidding, right? He's still following his orders.
Right.
But he's then Cody leaves, and he's kind of like, when he sees Cody leave, I think he's like, oh shit, like okay.
Right. I mean, the thing is, like, Cody didn't even kill that lady. He did.
No.
And then, but yet Cody still, went AWOL after that.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big moment for him. Not enough to obviously make him do anything yet.
No.
At that point.
No.
But this is the kind of the tipping point for it, and I think that's why it's exciting. It's a little bit more. There's a little bit more subtext here than literal text, which is in the episode 2, and that's fine. I guess what I'm saying here is I don't think that the subtext here is telling much of a different story than the literal text of episode 2 did, Solitary Clone. So it's a little bit of a wash for me. I do
Right.
like the moments, like the connective moments with Mayday and Crosshair, that when he's like on that mine and everything, that's great.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
brilliant
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
I'm gripping, to be honest, and for sure. And the story of Mayday is tragic, but it does feel like Mayday's kind of fridged here a little bit, and
Yeah.
that's not really, I don't feel like, fair to that character, and like it just feels like killing a character to as a emotional, which is fridging, just to be clear. Just deriving what fridging is,
Yes.
killing a character, typically a woman, but in this case not, to provide emotion, to give emotional lift to a character's journey,
To another
and
character. Yeah.
to another
Yeah.
character, right? Typically a man.
Right.
Now, again, this is a stretch of that definition, but I do feel like it feels a bit cheap to me in the way that they go about it, and because it's done over one episode,
Right.
and
That's the issue. I was just going to
and
say.
that's probably the problem.
I think there would be a little bit more weight to it if we had a little bit longer with Mayday and Crosshair together, right?
Yeah,
It had a little bit more of a bond because, like, obviously, if this same scenario played out with one of his, Unit 99 members, that
sure.
would be huge, and that would be one of those things that it's like, when he kind of says they're like, you could have saved him, right? Like, that has weight to it, but it would have more weight if their relationship was longer and stronger.
Right. Yeah, totally. All right, so let's get into the breakdown here. We start on Coruscant, as I mentioned before, and yada yada yada. We talked about this already, but we meet Lieutenant Nolan, and to be honest, I thought the design of Lieutenant Nolan was kind of weird. Like, his face looked kind of weird. I don't know. It had this like
Me
Rebels
too.
almost like non-detail compared to. So I think back to last week and the visual, like the actual face design and the art that they used to do Dr. Hemlock, and like how
Yeah.
detailed it was and interesting. And then you have this guy, Lieutenant Nolan, who's like just basic ass white guy that they like forgot to detail his face.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that bothers me, because I've been championing this show looks so good, and then this guy just looks so
Flat.
plain and flat and like non-detailed. It's weird.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, he's kind of got like not a squished face, but like a very just flat face. Yeah.
It does kind of look like he got hit in the face with a frying pan, and
Yeah.
and like maybe it's supposed to be like, hey, he has no wrinkles because he's young or whatever.
Right, right, yeah.
You know, everyone has smile lines and like frown stuff, and like he had nothing. It's weird. That's all. And it ultimately doesn't matter because he's such a crappy character that,
Right.
And crappy is in like bad person. He's a fine enough character, good villain, but yeah. So we meet Lieutenant Nolan, and the first thing we see him do is chastise Crosshair for not being in uniform. And by not being in uniform, it just means he didn't have his helmet on. Which is the only time we've ever seen anyone get mad at another trooper for that, is Phasma in episode 7.
Right, yeah.
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 So, as far as I can remember anyway. So Nolan is going to be the commanding officer in this mission, and they're off to the Imperial Depot on Barton 4. Cargo is being targeted by local insurgents. It's amazing how often they use insurgents as the quote-unquote bad guys here. And the other thing about this episode that kind of bugs me, and because we've seen so much of like the other side of this, like, hey, you know, these missions are being run by the Empire, but here are the real people being affected, and it's like it's not their fault, right? In this case, they're like murdering these people, and we have no idea who they are, what their story is, and it feels a little bit like Star Wars has moved beyond that a little bit, and has been more multi-dimensional. But in this episode, it's purely about Crosshair and Mayday, and these living beings that they're murdering are just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Help me out. Help me. I'm
What do you
floundering.
mean? Like they're like a nuisance, or like they're
No,
like...
they're just being treated like they like throwaway trash.
Oh, yes, yes.
And,
Yeah.
And I just think that's an interesting choice in an episode where we're supposed to like really feel about these characters right after they murdered a bunch of seemingly innocent people. So,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and
It's like
maybe
they're
not innocent,
insurgents,
they've
but it's like,
obviously killed clones, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I get it. It's like, okay, yeah, you're calling them insurgents, but it's like, is this their home world, and are you just here, like,
Right.
causing havoc? Like,
The
yeah.
last time we've seen people called insurgents, I don't think we would have we wouldn't classify them insurgents. They wouldn't call themselves insurgents,
No,
you know,
no.
and they're just freedom fighters or whatever. And in this case, it's probably something similar, and we don't get that perspective here. And I think that does rob the episode. I feel like I'm coming down on this episode way harder than I normally would, but only because people keep calling it like the best one, and I just don't agree with that. So
Yeah, I think it's up there for sure, but, yeah, I would
yeah,
agree that it's not the best, but it's up there, yeah.
right. So we learn a lot about Nolan really quickly. We obviously right away we see that he's a bit of a hard ass, but also that he doesn't like clones. Right? He's like, ugh.
Of course not.
And he's like something wrong. He's like, I just don't like used equipment. He says, and it's like,
Yeah,
what a terrible way to talk to a human being. But
right?
again,
Yeah.
this is up there with like some of the best Star Wars villains. Very fun to kill him later in the episode.
Yes.
Okay, so we arrive at Barton 4, and the planet is a snowy one. It's snowy and mountainy, icy, very hostile of a planet. I love how we cut to interior of the ship, and Nolan's like freaking out as they're landing through this storm, right? He's kind of nervous, even though he talks a big game.
Yeah.
And as they offload, this is like maybe the best kind of like show don't tell moment in animation in this season. But like he slips a little bit on the ramp,
Yeah.
and then like one of the officers goes to like hold him, like stabilize him, and he like shakes it off, and then tells him he's the one who has to guard the ship.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just so petty, but it does such a good job of telling you everything you need to know about this crappy person.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It's like, oh, you've got like such a big like ego kind of thing. Yeah, like, ugh. Just the worst.
It's really impressive how quickly the Empire was able to find all these people after the Republic fell, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Maybe not. Maybe they just come out of the woodwork. They were always there,
Yeah.
but then like, oh, okay, finally I can be in charge. I've been a shitty person my entire life, but no one gave me any responsibility because I'm so crappy. But now I can finally succeed in a system that rewards me for my crappiness.
Mhm. These are all the guys. I'm sorry, I shouldn't generalize, but I'm going to.
It's
But
usually guys.
these types of characters, like this guy in particular, is like the type of person who would, in our world, try and be a cop, but can never pass the exams. Like, can never
Oh,
pass the
yes.
like psychological exams because it's like,
Totally.
oh no, like
Oh, that
you
you're
just
unhinged. Yeah.
yeah,
right.
it's like you just want to like abuse, you know,
The power.
you want to
Right.
abuse it even more than than what already happens. But
Well, there's yeah,
it's
exactly. So
but I
there's
mean, yeah, it's like you're like even the cops don't want you. You're so fucked up.
right. Until until like someone like that ends up as the police chief, and then all of a sudden the rules
Well,
are
yeah.
different, right?
It's like
And
those
so-
guys you have it like in high school too that are just like bullies their whole life, and then they end up
Yes.
being like a security guard in some like shitty
Oh, yes,
bar for
exactly.
the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and like there's a couple of analogs to real world. Obviously, the way that they treat the clones as like retired soldiers is very similar to way that like retired
Like veterans,
military
yeah.
people, veterans are
Yeah.
treated now, and like not given enough respect or resources. And I think that's a
No.
fair commentary. So all right, they land. Nolan slips. Once they get inside, Nolan looks to speak with a droid. Where's your manager? Real Karen energy.
Yeah.
And these droids kind of look like K2 units. It's kind of like this like proto K2 unit. It's kind of interesting design choice. They're interrupted by a clone trooper with a large beard who complains that they were supposed to be relieved 36 rotations ago. Now, is a rotation a day or a week? Or is it a month, or is it like, how does that work out? Or does it depend on the planet?
It would probably depend on the planet, but usually I think a rotation is like a day on whatever planet you're on.
And they
right?
typically use Coruscant as the like central time body, right? Like it's Universal Standard Time is Coruscant time.
Yeah,
Right.
'cause 36 like months would be insane.
Right.
So it was obviously like, yeah, I would say like a rotation is probably a
But
day.
then later he says he's been there for over a year.
Yeah.
So maybe that just means like he's been there for a year, but his men have rotated in and out.
Yeah, I think he's been there a long time, but they've just been like losing men consistently and like getting no help.
And it's been
for-
over a year since the war has ended,
Yes.
correct? In
yeah.
the show? Yeah.
I think so,
that's
yeah.
right. And so because we later find out that he's a commander. So he actually
Mhm.
outranked basically every clone that we knew except for Cody.
Right. Yeah.
And except Rex was
Rex is
technically commander for
captain.
a short time and then was demoted right before. Remember this this loophole right as he was
Oh,
as
yes.
the Order
Um,
66 stuff was happening.
yes. Right, because
It was
Ahsoka
Commander
was the
Rex. Yes.
commander. Yeah.
So I still think that's funny. I actually don't mind that one, but it's funny. So it's interesting that he's considered a commander, but he's being outranked by this lieutenant. And he's like, hey, you guys were supposed to be here 36 rotations ago. The first reaction from Nolan is we work on the Empire's schedule. I love how he says schedule.
Oh,
Schedule,
I hate that.
not yours.
So
Again, so this
pompous.
person is just so angry all the time. Like he just and like so right away we get this little bickering over rank. The way he says lieutenant is really interesting here. We get introduced to Veach and and Hex, the other two named clones here who don't get any spoken dialogue. And then we later find out that Mayday is the one who's speaking here, but we don't learn his name yet. Again, then he said, your failings will be dealt with later, talking about how his men are all dead. No compassion for the human experience here. Just it's all productivity. It's all about serving the Empire. I mean, there's all these references. The way that again, last week we had Dr. Hemlock talk about serving a higher purpose, the Emperor's purpose. Then we have him talking about how they run on the Empire's schedule. There's a lot of these references to who are you to decide what's important for the Empire. We don't want to waste Imperial resources, et cetera, et cetera. It's all bullshit. He's just making this shit. It's just an excuse to be an asshole.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Just an abuse of power, like always.
But it's and the thing is, it's like this person's kind of been like he's new in this role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously.
Oh yeah.
How many missions have you commanded? That's what I thought, right?
Yeah.
And is put in this position because he's the type of person that the Empire likes or rewards, and that's how we end up in this much worse situation later on with like this Tarkin doctrine and all this stuff. But it's interesting to see it happening in front of people who didn't go up through that system,
Right.
And
yeah.
so now it's clashing with this kind of more human first type of mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's really interesting. I love how we get that line that I think everyone's been waiting for someone to say to an Imperial officer forever, which is, in my experience, respect is something that is earned.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a great line. It's a great zinger, because he's not saying, I'm not saying you can't get respect. I'm just saying you'd have to win it first. You have to earn it, right? Love that. Any thoughts on kind of this introductory scene to Mayday? Anything else you'd add?
Yeah, I just liked his whole vibe in general. Like I don't know.
Very cool. Very self-confident.
Yeah, which is nice. I don't know. It's nice to see. And it's nice to see another clone trooper that feels like Rex and feels like the good guys.
But
he's not just.
Would love to know which Jedi he worked under.
Yeah.
Would be really curious to see. What his experiences were like during the war. The thing about these relationships, these clones that had direct relationships with the Jedi, and then were in these leadership positions, is that they often were more emotionally intelligent than their fellow clones, right? And maybe that's part of the reason they were promoted or whatever, right?
Right.
But it's just always interesting to see these leadership role clones who act more human than maybe some of the more droid-like kind of breaks,
Yeah, to me, he felt more familiar. Like he felt more like a Clone Wars era clone.
Yeah,
exactly. not
well,
this
and he's been
new...
stationed out there for so long that he hasn't been exposed to this kind of Imperial doctrine, right?
Yeah, which is and then I was like a beardy, shaggy-looking clone too.
Yeah, he's got, and his beard's a very shaggy. I like a well-kept beard a little bit better than the one that he's got there, but fair enough. And a lot of gray in there too.
Yeah.
To know. So Mayday offers to show Crosshair around. They have this little introduction, and I love how he's like, "Hey, my name's Mayday. What's your name?" Basically, and Crosshair has this whole moment where he doesn't even want to give his name. He just kind of he's been referred to by his number, and it wasn't by. In fact, at the beginning of this episode, was referred to by his number, and so maybe he's out of practice with that. But again, this is just kind of this like closed off side of him, and he just doesn't want to do it. But he does open up, and he does reveal his name as Crosshair. Nice little scene there. We see that they've got a little shrine of clone trooper helmets for the dead troopers there. It's nice. Outside, Mayday and Crosshair head out to the kind of the perimeter of their base, and the storm is still raging, and they kind of talk about a few things. They talk about how they've been there for a year, watching this cargo, and how he's kind of hoping that now that they're here, that they might actually be able to get to leave. Crosshair asks about, who's been attacking. They just say that, they're natives. The natives have been attacking. Again, interesting choice of words here. So
yeah.
They talk about how they keep getting past your equipment. The weather has been so intense that it's degraded their equipment. They haven't been able to get any replacements, though, despite having making calls to the Empire to do so. And they were told that they need to protect the equipment that they're guarding at all costs, hence all the loss of life. But they don't know what's inside the crates, right? And he said that it's above their pay grade to look inside, right? We find out why later on. Crosshair starts exploring a little bit, but Mayday warns him not to go too far outside the perimeter on his own, because if the cold doesn't kill him, he's basically saying, in that armor that you have, you'll freeze if the stuff that's in the ice doesn't kill you first. And I guess we see that Mayday's helmet and his armor is all covered in he kind of looks like a little bit like a mummy.
Like a mummy? I know. I was going to think the same thing.
He's all wrapped up and
so cool looking,
Dengar-esque almost.
Yeah, really, actually a lot like Dengar. That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I liked that. And it shows too that they're not even given snow trooper armor.
There's snow trooper armor. They could have that, but they didn't get that. No. That's so wild.
And that already exists for the clones too, the shrouds or the cowls that they've had before.
And
but
even what's his name? Asshole Nolan has snow gear. He's got that kind of the longer helmet and the furry stuff.
Yeah. But no, they're just using scraps of whatever to keep themselves warmer.
It is a cool design. I mean, this is one of those examples of okay, so this is Clone Commander who doesn't really have a unique color scheme. Obviously, they weren't allowed to keep those. It doesn't seem like after Order 66. So he's kind of unique in the sense that he's wearing this wrappings. It keeps it. It is really cool look. Would be a really cool Black Series figure.
Absolutely. Which I think sometimes that's the game.
Yeah, it's just about introducing new toys.
Yeah.
So they talk about the snow vultures, which I think they're literally called snow vultures, if I'm not mistaken.
Ice vultures, I think.
Ice vultures. That's even cooler than snow vultures. And how that they deserve respect because even though everything is a frozen wasteland, they know how to survive. Which I guess is a kind of a key theme here about later on. How do you interpret this whole vulture thing and how it plays out?
I mean, I was just bummed we didn't get to see one up close.
Up close?
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck? They're gonna have this cool ice bird flowing around and we don't even get to see one up close at all. I'm like, I was bummed out. But I guess vultures
design the toy.
Vultures don't attack people, right? They just kind of
they're scavengers.
They're scavengers, yeah. But I'm like, oh man, I wanted to see this to see what it looked like, but
and I
because they looked huge.
Yeah, it's obviously quite big. Vultures are really big too if you see them up close.
That's true.
It reminded me of the owl that follows Ahsoka.
Oh, Morai?
Morai, yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously for similar because it's kind of symbolizing, I think, similar but different things, right? And,
yes.
And also the look and feel of the planet's very similar to where Ahsoka crash lands and Vader goes and finds her sabers at the end of Clone Wars. So there's a lot of similarities there. Birds obviously usually exemplify freedom. A vulture typically, in this case, exemplifies danger.
Death too is vultures.
Impending death, right? So I think that's cool. It's curious to me what about seeing the shadow of the vulture kind of inspires him to kill Nolan later, because everything else was enough of a justification. But seeing this vulture as, I guess, something that's waiting around for things to die, and he
Yeah,
doesn't want to
yeah.
wait around to. He just doesn't want to wait around to die. I'm just kind of exploring this as I go. I hadn't pre-thought this, obviously, but I don't know. What do you think?
No, definitely. I think because having an ice vulture, because it's kind of flying around through this whole episode, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So it kind of sets that tone of a little bit of, like kind of death is just waiting for you. It's flying right above you, right? So I don't know if I necessarily caught the symbolism of it happening like in Crosshair seeing it to like make that decision, but I don't know. I feel like with him near the end of this episode, when it comes
Well, he's
to that
had it at
lieutenant,
that
he's
point. Yeah.
done. Like, and he's just like, okay, like you're gonna let me probably just die here too. So he's
Well,
just
he says so as much, actually. So
yeah.
it's not
So
even a question.
yeah, it's like it's okay. It's like it's me or you at this point.
Yeah.
But
Right.
and it's like if I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go out and with some revenge, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, we'll talk about it when we get there. So okay,
Yeah.
so Raiders attack the base. Mayday and Crosshair jump into action. They kind of split up to do a pincer movement. Crosshair spots one of the insurgents blowing up a transport ship, and in so killing a trooper. When it explodes, it blinds his thermal, so he has to remove his helmet. This is the first time he does so. Again, after he puts it on, after being chided by Nolan earlier, and I'm not sure. Like, I feel like that's a callback to when I feel like it happens at another time where he's had his thermals blinding him.
Oh
I
yeah.
can't remember when that was.
I don't
but
know.
I think it's a callback to that. Anyway, so Crosshair gets one shot off. Interesting that they don't show the blaster bolt. Like, they just show it from us looking at him shooting, and we don't
Right.
see the reversed angle. Which, again, because this is a real person, so they don't really want to show that as
No.
much. Anyway, so that's interesting. And so he gets a shot off. It doesn't kill him, though, because he goes to investigate the crash site and finds that the insurgent has escaped, but he's bleeding. And so he follows the blood trail into the wilderness and into this tunnel cave scenario, which is a surprise to Mayday. He's like, oh, so this is how they're getting past our defenses.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought it was interesting that they showed so much blood.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point,
Because
actually.
I was like, they don't normally show like a lot of blood in Star Wars. Like even when there's like they're following something, they'll show like green blood or they'll show
Right, that's a good point, actually. I
you
didn't even
know?
think about that.
Yeah, just
This
like
is
that red blood in the snow. I was like, oh shit, they're like
because we don't know what kind of we don't know what kind of people these
no.
people are, and it seems like they're just people.
Yeah.
It seems like so.
Which is like, yeah, I think it's very rare for them, especially in the animated, to show blood.
Yeah, they could use anything, any color, but they chose to do like dark red blood on the white snow. So yeah, I think that is good call out. So, they investigate the tunnel and head back towards their base. Inside, they place the helmet of the trooper that died on their shrine, and as they're kind of taking this moment of silence, Nolan comes in and is annoyed that they're just standing around, right? And starts complaining about the attacks. Again, just the worst. So, 2 crates were taken during the attack, and he wants them to go back and get them. And Matey says that they don't have enough men, right? They're understaffed, so you need to give me your men if I'm going to do that. And he says, nope, I'm not. This is your problem. You and Crosshair alone have to go solve this. Again, extra, because it's like also there's a storm going on. Like, could this not wait till tomorrow? Like, why is this so important that it happens now? And the reason is because he's been assigned one task: bring back all the crates that are there, right? Defend them. That was your job. You're not doing it right. And all he knows is kind of like approval from his bosses, right? So if he has 2 less crates, then he's going to get in shit. So he has to, pass that shit along. Shit rolls downhill. That whole saying. So. It's just, but he's just doing it in just the worst possible way. So, they are like, okay, well, we got to do what we got to do. So I like that they don't like waste a lot of time here. So they get right back into it. They make their way through the cave and they spot the raider who Crosshair shot earlier. They note that he didn't make it very far, and that his friends left him behind. Crosshair makes this comment about like, yeah, it makes sense. They don't want to. Why carry the dead weight? And that's when we get this really great line from Mayday. It was like, yeah, remind me not to die on your watch.
Yeah.
which I guess is some foreshadowing
A bit
here,
of a foreshadowing, yeah.
but I just thought it's like one of those moments of endearment that we get between
Mhm.
the two of them.
Well,
And
I
it's
also
nice.
think it kind of like it comes back even before he dies, right?
Right.
Because it's like he gets super injured, but then Crosshair's not just going to leave him, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Totally. That's a good point too. So they get this there's this weird section where the cave creaks and like, maybe it's just the ice shifting or whatever. Maybe that's a foreshadowing for the avalanche that comes later, potentially. So as they continue, Crosshair steps on a pressure mine. And so this is kind of a Star Wars version of a landmine.
Mhm.
And obviously landmines terrible. There's lots of examples of scenarios where people step on a mine and they're stuck there until someone can figure out what to do with
Yes.
it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's really cool, in my opinion, that they have landmines in Star Wars, and it's also quite dark when you start thinking about it. But
Yeah.
they're gonna figure out a way to disarm it. So Mayday offers to help disarm it, despite not he said making that joke, even though because he doesn't want to carry his body back, which I think is funny. Um, and he says he's not an expert and doesn't have the right equipment, but he does talk about how being left out there has forced him to learn how to improvise. And I guess the
Right.
implication is that throughout the war that they had to figure out how to improvise. And he starts kind of just talking to kind of keep himself distracted as he starts putting these little like pins down
Mhm.
to like lock it in place so that it won't blow up when
Yeah, to
he
hold the
takes his foot out.
pressure.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool like visualization of that concept.
Yeah, it
Just
is really
really
cool.
awesome.
And I like how like he's like tapping them in
Like
and
his little
then
teeny hammer. Yeah.
yeah, like taps them in a little bit and then he has to go back around and like re-tap them to kind of
Yeah.
like
Totally.
adjust it, right? It's
It's
like
just
very
it's just really
precise
cool.
work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but he's being very casual about it. It's like
Mhm.
good bedside manner, basically.
Yeah, just
Um,
chit-chatting.
yeah, and he's like, I never really thought about the end of the war. Just another one of those examples of the clones not really thinking about their life beyond their current job. And so he's like, well, what unit were you a part of? And we never got to find out what unit he was a part of, by the way, which is a shame. But he says that he was a part of Clone Force 99. It's interesting that he'd never heard of them before, so that's kind of fun too, because it kind
Yeah.
of seemed like they were kind of like celebrities in a kind of an infamous kind of way. But
Well, that or like they got bullied.
yeah, well, it just seemed like they were well known in the sense that
Mhm.
like they were a highly specialized unit, but
Yeah.
more infamous than famous, I suppose. And then he talks about how like, hey, the clone, he's like, what happened to them? He's like, they're gone. And he says like, well, look at us, the survivors, right? Just more of these kind of I guess foreshadowing for later, and just talking about how they, despite the war being over, they're still around, and now they have to grapple with that, and how the clone, like Clone Force 99 and the Bad Batch, have grappled with it in a very much more practical way, right? The war is
Right.
over. What does that mean? Who is the Empire, and where's our role in it? And as a survivor, Crosshair did the opposite. He kind of turtled and went back into a shell and said, well, I am a soldier, so I don't want to grapple. He's in denial about the reality that they survived the war and now it is over. And that their
Right.
job is now over. Right? So I think that's really fascinating. It's kind of, again, another kind of wake up call for Crosshair.
Mhm.
And then he talks about how, like, what brought you down here? And he's like, well, it's a mission's a mission, right? That keeps us busy. And he's, talking about how, no, that, like, I used to think that way, but not really anymore. And then he finishes and goes around the corner before Crosshair takes his foot off.
I love
he's
that.
like I'm, listen, I'm confident but not stupid. So
Yeah.
it's a nice.
And again,
callback.
it's so casual. He just kind of walks and you hear him like,
Mhm.
kind of echoing in the background.
Yeah, nice and slow. Like, take your foot off, nice and slow. Like,
Mhm.
any thoughts on this conversation?
I just really I enjoyed it. I liked how casual it was while they're dealing with this like pretty terrifying thing and like
Sure.
I think Crosshair's obviously scared, like anybody would be who's just stepped on a mine.
Landmine. Yeah.
But he's still able to kind of like have this kind of soft, normal conversation with another clone without being his typical Crosshair self. Because I think we
Well,
get to
he's in the most
see,
vulnerable. He's literally
yeah,
vulnerable here,
yeah,
right?
which is
He
nice
has
to
to put his
see
faith in
him.
someone else's hands.
Yeah, it's nice to see him like that again and have to do that again. And I think that's reminding him a little bit of what he lost with the Bad Batch as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Yeah,
Because it's like,
totally.
okay, this guy's going out of his way to like help me. He's not just leaving me and being like, well, sucks to suck. I'm gonna go over here.
Right?
Have
Yeah.
fun with that landmine. So
sucks to suck.
yeah,
That's funny.
because
Yeah.
it's like, man, he's been dealing with the Empire so long of just like treating him like garbage, and then here's this a clone, obviously going out of his way to try and help him in this vulnerable state. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It again, it's this really nice look at humanity.
yeah, it's a really good
Um,
moment.
so they survive obviously, and they exit the cave, and they spot the outpost across this gully. Crosshair accounts for multiple contacts and 2 guards, which they say shouldn't be a problem for them. And the music takes a very funky turn here. Like, it's very synthy. The friend of the show, Ryan Airy, talks about how they thought that the music for this episode might be a callback to The Thing,
Oh, okay.
and because it's on this remote outpost in the snow, and it's got this eerie kind of quality to it. And I think that's a seemingly fair assessment. I've never seen The Thing,
Me
so
neither.
I don't like scary movies, guys. I don't know what to tell you. All right, so they take out the 2 guards really quickly and really up close and personal, and that's kind of the first time we get to see what they look like. We don't get to see their faces, but we see they're all bundled up and they got kind of goggles on and stuff.
Yeah,
We do hear that what they sound like, and they kind of sound like Tusken Raiders, like the way that they
a
speak
little
to each
bit.
other.
Yeah,
I guess I don't know if that's supposed to help necessarily,
I don't know. I mean,
but
yeah,
again,
it's
yeah.
yeah, it's different when they're not quote unquote human and they're not
hmm
speaking
But they
basic.
have red blood. They have
Yeah.
2 legs and 2 arms. They look
Yeah, they're
human.
humanoid for
Yeah.
sure. And man, like they take out so many of them
Yeah, I know.
too.
It is
This whole scene is
wild.
violent.
Yeah. So they use this stun grenade to start things off, and then they just start blasting. And they're behind this rock, and they just taking out like countless numbers of these raiders, right?
Yeah.
It looks like they're about to get overrun. The music here is really intense and very cool. Big shout out to Kevin Kiner here. And then just as it look like they're about to get pinned down, Crosshair shoots a stack of mines
Yeah.
and takes out the cave. The cave that they're all in collapses, and they jump out of the way and are able to survive. But everyone else is seemingly dead. It's wild stuff.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, well, let's grab this cargo and get the hell out of here. Like, it's not worth it. But then we get this really amazing scene where they find that the gear that they've been protecting is actually TK troopers, stormtrooper gear, and it's been there for years. I guess they've been planning this for a long time.
Yeah.
Which is the implication here, which is even more kind of unsettling. And then he says, after all the clones have done, after all we sacrificed, we were good soldiers. We followed orders.
Yeah.
And for what?
Yeah.
That's the thesis statement of the Bad Batch,
Oh,
basically.
pretty much, yeah. No, and it's just like especially like how like dejected and angry would you feel being like I've been asking for gear. I've been asking
Right.
for help and it was just sitting here all along. Like we could have been he even says we could have been using this.
Yeah.
And it's like you have me here just protecting gear that I'm not even allowed to wear. Like that's
it's just so dehumanizing, and so
yeah.
I think another one of those wake up calls for that come fast and furious here for Crosshair. So.
Yeah.
So then at that moment, an avalanche starts coming down from the top of the mountain, and they try to outrun it, but there's no really way to outrun avalanche. So they start running, and it looks like Mayday saves Crosshair's life, because I wasn't sure what was going on there. It looked like they were trying to get behind that rock, but they weren't going to make it. And if they didn't make it, they were going to get smashed into the rock by the snow.
I think
Mayday
so, yeah.
pushes him out of the way so he doesn't get smashed into the rock, but in doing so, he gets smashed into the rock. Am I correct in that?
I think so, yeah. That's kind of what I gathered from it. Yeah.
Okay. So as long as we're on the same page there. The look on Crosshair's face as he's getting covered in that snow is of pure terror.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can relate. I've never been in that type of situation necessarily.
That would be terrifying.
But I have been covered in snow, and I don't like it.
It's not fun, and it's like it's super dangerous. Like there's people die all the time on mountains from like even just small, not even an avalanche size, but just small kind of like on ski hills. And if you fall into one of those tree wells wrong, like it's if you just take a tumble like head first into a snowbank, it's
But
really
good luck
hard to
getting
get out.
out.
Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah.
it's wild.
Um, yeah, it is actually, and I just
Yeah.
very
It's like snow
claustrophobic.
is heavy and it
Yeah,
suffocates you, and yeah.
yeah. So Crosshair somehow though survives fairly easily. He emerges from the snow, but it does look like he's freezing cold.
Yeah.
He spots what looks like to be Mayday and makes his way through the waist-deep snow to get to him.
They make it way too easy, for the
Yeah, it's
record.
really hard to get through the snow that deep.
They make it look like he can just like he's like swimming through it like it's water. And I was like,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm like, waist deep snow is like
especially
moving
packed
through.
down after an avalanche. Like,
Yeah,
come on. Yeah,
it's like probably trying to like move through like dirt or concrete. Like it's like
yeah, it's very hard to do. So,
yeah.
but the story the script
No.
requires it.
But
So,
it looks cool. Even like
and
the way
also,
the snow looks on him and on his
yeah.
armor and stuff. Like
Oh,
the
on the
yeah.
beard on
Mhm.
Mayday's beard, it looks so cool.
Yeah.
To be fair to Lucasfilm, they are based in California, so
Yeah,
there's a
they
lot
don't
of
know.
snow.
They don't know what snow looks like.
Yeah. So he digs his way down to find Mayday unconscious and barely alive. Mayday tells him at first to leave, but Crosshair takes a
Mhm.
moment and he chooses to stay. And that's a very important moment. He
Yes.
chooses to stay.
Yeah. Doesn't just
And
leave him for dead weight or dead.
that's right. And he doesn't abandon them. He even puts Mayday's helmet back on. And I think what's interesting here is that in this avalanche, Crosshair loses his helmet.
Yeah, it's gone.
And I think that's like a significant kind of
I think
metaphor.
so. Yeah, I think so too.
Because that helmet shields his face.
Mhm.
It covers him up and separates him from the world. And also, he was told to put it on as part of his uniform, and it is the kind of the hat to his uniform, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So to lose it, to have it removed and thrown away, and not to care, is this kind of nice metaphorical change for Crosshair to kind of attach himself to someone
Absolutely.
and separate himself from the Empire in that way. And it's also been a part of his personality for a long time, right? Since forever. So it cuts to daytime, and the two of them are it's still storming, and the two of them are slowly making their way through the storm. We see that Crosshair's kind of carrying him, and they're looking to find shelter. They kind of find some behind a rock, and they kind of huddle together for warmth.
Yeah.
Cut to the storm passing. It's still daytime, and the two of them are now using Crosshair's rifle as a crutch. You know, the tools of war are being used as a support for humanity. And they see some transports arrive overhead, so they know they're close as they make their way closer to the outpost. At the outpost, TK troopers, there's more of them now, are loading cargo onto the transports, and it's pretty clear that that Nolan doesn't give a shit about them because he didn't even care to check in on them. So someone notices Crosshair and Mayday arriving, and everyone looks up and like stops what they're doing to come check out what's happening. And they make their way across the tarmac, and Nolan greets them, the first to kind of say to them anything. But before he does that, he tells all the troopers to get back to work. Two of the troopers look at each other and shrug, and then just walk off. I guess there's this sense, the idea here is that they're being like, well, shouldn't we do something? But we're being told not to, so I guess whatever, and we'll just go back to work.
Yeah.
And so that's that kind of that coldness of the Empire, even though there's real people under those. So Nolan greets them, quote unquote, and he's basically like chiding them immediately, like, you didn't, like, where's the cargo? You failed your mission. We'll deal with that later. And then the Crosshair's like, he needs a medic, and he's like, he will die if we don't get a medic. And Nolan's response is just no.
Yeah.
It's a waste of resources. No.
Ugh, which is like, it's heartbreaking. Saying it's a waste of resources after like, especially like even the look on Crosshair's face after that, like it's kind of like, what? Like, you know, he drags this guy from all the way where they were, like trying to keep him alive. He does his best to try and keep him alive, gets him all the way to like basically the door of where you needed to be. Like, okay, we should be good now. And to just get told no, like it's
yeah, it's really that's the toughest part of this episode.
It is.
Everyone's like, this is the moment, right? And I think it's heartbreaking because it's so callous.
It's so cold and like
and cruel. Because here's the thing. He's like, who are you to decide what the Empire? He says this earlier in the episode, like, who are you to decide what the Empire's resources where they should be spent or whatever. And it's like, well, who are you to decide that?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and like the only thing that Crosshair knows is that, as a military organization, the thing that people care about in that organization is each other, and
Yeah.
that no one gets left behind and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this kind of such abrupt change to this completely
Mm-hmm.
disrespectful
Well,
methodology.
especially when he knows that there's just crates and crates of gear and like
Right.
all this stuff, and it's like, what's one med pack? What's one?
Yeah, exactly.
To save.
What's one back to
Yeah.
tank. So it's like,
Yeah, it's like, what's a waste of resources?
yeah,
Like,
I
ugh.
just it's brutal. And so he tells him that, like, listen, he's expendable. He, first of all, Crosshair dies in kind of a, or not Crosshair, sorry,
Mayday.
Mayday dies here, and he basically goes like, as soon as he says no, he goes and dies, which is, I feel, is like, he could be dying and this would still be just as,
Yeah.
I think, as impactful. Like, I don't think he needs to die at that exact moment, but maybe he does for Crosshair to get the message through.
Yeah.
Like, it needs to jam it through your thick skull, right? And so he's pissed. He's like, you could have saved him. And he's like, yeah, but he was expendable, just like you are, and if you keep talking to me like that, you'll end up in the same fate, right? And so that we get that, that music cue that we got in episode 2 when she shoots that lady, and it's like, boom. We get a very similar music cue here, and he looks at the body of Mayday.
Yeah.
Then he looks at Nolan, and then he sees the shadow of that vulture,
Mm-hmm.
and he just like, nope, that's it. So he stands up, calls to Nolan, and shoots him through the chest. He didn't shoot him at the back.
No.
He shot him through the chest. And I like the way that they do it is really cool, where we don't see him shoot it necessarily, but we see how it all plays out. It's kind of cool.
I was not expecting that either. I was like,
I thought at this point, there's no way he doesn't shoot this guy. I just thought there's no way. Right? I was expecting it.
I wasn't like, not, it kind of like, obviously when he stands up, I'm like, oh, okay, like now he is, but like I wasn't before this. The 2 seconds before that, I was not expecting him to stand up and just shoot him. I was like, oh man, good for you.
Yeah, seriously, and good for him, because that guy was a real asshole.
Yeah,
real piece of work. So, Crosshair falls to his knees, looking at Mayday's body. He drops his guns. TK troopers come over to arrest him, but he passes out. He wakes up, and we hear the voice of a female doctor. This is Dr. Emery, who we've seen before at Mount Tantus. And she refers to him by his number, but does ask if he prefers to be called by his name, which is a different, kind of a little bit of a different tone.
Yeah.
Right? And it turns out he's being held for observation on Mount Tantus, and that when he's feeling better, the doctor will come for you, which, again, the presumption is that that's Dr. Hemlock, looking for a way to get to Omega, I think is the idea.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And he says, remain calm, and if you cooperate, you might survive. and then injects him with something in the neck, and then he passes out and cut to black.
Yeah.
What do you make of this kind of final sequence here?
Yeah, like it's I wasn't too sure what was going to happen to him, obviously, after he shoots that lieutenant. It's like, okay, like what are the other troopers going to do, right?
Typically,
like,
he would probably be shot.
Most likely,
he would be tried in a pretty quick kind of trial, quote unquote, military trial, and then probably hung or shot by firing squad.
Exactly. But it's like, okay, like this is a very different fate, right? So as soon as you see that female doctor, you're like, oh, okay, so
right,
like it's almost worse than him just like being in handcuffs or whatever, like on the transport, being like, oh, we're gonna take you back to Coruscant and blah blah blah, and then maybe he could escape, right? But this is like, oh no, they have him. So it's I don't know if we're gonna get the next episode right away and kind of resolve this. I
don't think so, because I was just looking at the episodes. The Summit and Plan 99 are the final 2 episodes of the season. I don't think we see him again until the Summit.
Probably,
The next 2 are Pabu and Tipping Point. It's possible Tipping Point,
maybe,
but it's probably not next week.
Yeah.
I think likely we get to deal with the close out the Sid stuff next week, probably.
Yeah, probably.
And then we get into whatever is going on here. And I think, interestingly, because of what we saw last week, we can infer what's going on here, but we don't know how he's going to be used. Is he going to be used as bait?
Right.
Like, just like, hey, here's your here's your buddy, come get him type thing, or
Mhm.
is he going to be used in a more nefarious way? I don't. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Like, it's like, is he gonna he's probably gonna have a choice about whether to sell them out or not, but, like, he doesn't know where the Bad Batch are right now
Yeah, he
anyway,
doesn't know
but
anything about them, so he can't really
no.
get to them, but he can be used, I guess,
Yeah.
as bait. And That's
Well, it could be
that's
one
the
of
most
those things,
logical or
like
basic one, but I think there could be
yeah.
more to it.
Yeah, yeah. But, yeah, I guess we shall see what his fate is or whether, we see a bit
I
of a sacrifice
right.
from him again, but
What did we predict? That he was going to die?
yeah, I
I think
think
I
so.
predicted that he was going to die. I'm now less convinced. I think it's now very possible that he's redeemed and that he joins the group for next season.
I don't know. We'll see whether it's a full redemption or whether it's a redemption death kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that would be much more Star Wars themed.
Yeah.
The redeemed through death is very Star Warsy.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think that does it. Any final thoughts on this week's episode?
No, just that I'm glad we're getting again more into the
The meaty
nitty-gritty and the
stuff.
meat. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we got Zillow Beast last week and then we have this whole crosshair kind of starting to turn around arc happening here, so I'm just happy
It
with
feels
kind of where we're going.
consequential.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
feels
and
like
that's
the story is moving along now in like a better pace to what it was before.
it feels to me like the themes of these episodes align more with the themes of the series, and
Yeah,
that's more interesting than things that feel a little outside of that, and you wonder why you're doing those things when it doesn't
definitely.
kind of align with that larger vision. So yeah, I'm excited that we're in for an intense 4 more weeks here as we have these, or I guess technically 3 more. So 2 more standalone episodes and then the 2 back-to-back episodes. I will have to figure out how we handle those.
Mhm.
Um, and then anyway, it'll continue as we go here. But we'll be back next week
Yeah.
for chapter 19 of The Mandalorian, season 3, episode 3, which we don't know what that's called yet. And we'll be back next week as well for season 2, episode 13 of The Bad Batch, which is called Pabu,
Mhm.
whatever that means. Either way, may the force be with you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty.